What's Craig's last name? Tell me it again.
Are you ready? We're trying to get IT down here, man.
I need your last name.
My last name?
He's brand new.
I'm not that new. I've only been here about.
I never used your last name.
Italian Irish name.
Yeah.
Maniglia, right?
I think that-
Good morning, everyone. And welcome to the first interview of our first candidate, the first one on the rack, Dr. Asplin. I would like to introduce the board members first. I'm Caroline Zucker. I'm the chair. Introduce yourself.
I'm Shirley Brown, Vice Chair.
Good morning, Bridget Ziegler, School Board Member.
Jane Goodwin.
I'm Eric Robinson.
And sitting down there is our ever faithful, fabulous Miss Kathy Tompkins, who takes care of everything for us. In our room is Andrea Messina from the Florida School Board Association, Dr. Bill Vogel, who's ran this search, Mina, that's her last name, Mina, and Craig Meneglia, our Director of Communications. This is going to be a fast few minutes here, so the process for the time schedules, every candidate will have 90 minutes for our board interview. We have 90 minutes for our board interviews this morning. And each of the candidates will have 5 minutes to provide an opening statement. And each board member will ask a series of thematically based questions: operations, business, finance, personal leadership, instructional excellence, and board and staff community relations. Each board member is allocated 15 minutes and is prepared to ask up to 5 questions. The number of questions each gets to will depend upon the length of your response. You will have time at the end for final thoughts. We will start with the following 5 minutes for any opening comments that you may have, Dr. Asplin.
Right. Thank you. Am I on?
Is it red light on?
Red light's on, yes.
You're on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, and I am truly delighted to be here today and to see you all and to sit in this seat again. And but I do appreciate you having me here and interviewing me today. I want to thank the board and I want to thank the selection committee for inviting me. So yes, sir. Oh, I thought it was on, but now it's a bright red.
Brighter red.
So again, thank you. I'm very honored to be here this morning and be here in Sarasota County. As you know, I believe as you know, this isn't really about a job to me. This is, you know, I'm very selective in the openings that I've applied for, and I really am interested in Sarasota County And professionally, I really believe that we can work together to really help the students here in Sarasota County reach the next level and have the opportunities that they should have moving forward. Personally, I and my wife, we like to serve where we work, and living here in Sarasota County and serving in the community and being involved in the community is definitely a must. And we vacation here. Once a year we usually come and vacation. We've been to Longboat Key and Siesta Key and all the different places. And this weekend we were actually over in Venice, and Venice was really amazing for us and my family. I didn't realize this, but then I did when I was talking to my parents. I grew up in North Fort Myers, and so we would always come to Venice Beach. And my mom just really loved Venice Beach, and now I know why. It's very, very nice. Had a couple of manatees come by and touch my leg at the beach, which was amazing, and the sand dollars. And my grandson, who is a year and a half now, he just really enjoyed the water. But the area is just amazing. We really love the arts. And I guess about a month ago, my wife and I came and we drove around the entire county again just to take a look at the schools again. And I must say, the schools are amazing. They're very, very well maintained. The performing arts centers are just terrific, just fantastic. And I've been also following the news over the years in Sarasota just to see what's going on. And when we were driving around, though, I know we were out at Venice, and we were in Inglewood area, Northport area, and I remembered last time I was here, visited Herring Creek, and that's where I met the teachers and saw what was going on with the students and so forth, and that was just fantastic. But Northport's a very nice area with a big school and the performing arts theater. Also, I saw that there were a few things like Booker High School and the Visual Art and Performing Arts School. Dr. Rachel Shelley was the 2019 Florida Education Associate Principal of the Year, and that's just fantastic. I think that was awesome to see in the paper. I know I have 5 minutes, so I'll move forward. As you know, I bring multi-level proven experience to the district. I've been in 2 different school districts. I was in Seminole County for 18 years, and I've been in St. Johns County now for 14 years. I've worked for 4 different superintendents. I have teacher experience. I was a dean, assistant principal, an adjunct professor at the college, associate superintendent for human resources for 4 years, and now deputy superintendent for 5 years. But working in 2 different districts has been a plus for me and my experience. I've gained numerous and varied experience over that time, and I just wanted to just tell you a few things of what I've been doing over the last 5 years. First of all, leading many departments. The only department that I didn't actually lead was the operations department. That Deputy Superintendent Kathy Middlestad actually just became the superintendent in Flagler County. But I've worked very closely with the operations department on quite a few projects and leading that effort. But curriculum and instruction, testing and accountability, exceptional student education, early childhood federal programs, all of those, student services, student support services, been working with everyone to make sure that we do not have silos and that we're all working together. I fully implemented the PLC process in our district over the last 3 years. I was involved in the Do 4 Academy. There were 60 folks from across the nation who were involved in that back about 10 years ago with the Do 4s. And I started working that at Bartram Trail High School when I first came to St. John's. But these last 3 years, our superintendent really made that a priority. And I pushed that initiative, and it has been one of the greatest things that we've done. We've continued to have gains every single year. Our ESE graduation rate went from 69% to 85%. Our graduation rate for the whole district's at 94%. supported 2 turnaround schools that one went from a D to a B, one went from a D to an A. We converted our First Coast Technical College from a charter school over to a regular school in our district, and I'm working on their strategic plan as we speak. I evaluate principals, I hire, I assist with hiring and placing principals, I hire all the assistant principals, assisted with rezoning, reduce the number of high-stakes testing, also instrumental in opening 3 new K-8s, and a lot of us based on my dissertation research. Yes.
Time.
Oh, time, sorry.
I'm really going to be a stickler because we have such a limited time.
Sure.
I would ask the board members now to begin with, I'll begin with Mrs. Brown, but I would ask us to just ask the question and allow to answer the question, and don't put our own personal opinions or anything else. Don't digress into what's about us. It's about the candidate today. Mrs. Brown?
Discuss the most difficult personnel problem that you've ever had to deal with and how you handled it.
Okay. As the Associate Superintendent of Human Resources, there were quite a few of those, as you can imagine.
I'm having trouble
Oh,
hearing, so maybe
sorry.
move your book to the side so you could bring them,
Okay.
get closer.
All right. So working as the Associate Superintendent for Human Resources, there were quite a few personnel issues to deal with ongoing. I think one of the most difficult was when you are handling a situation with someone who you know. However, you are following policy, you're doing what is right, finding all of the facts and moving through that as I would with any other employee. And I know in particular, there was one time where I knew the person very well, and the situation was such that we needed to terminate that person. And that was one of the most difficult things, but it needed to be done. And part of what I do there, again, is collecting all the facts, make sure I have all the information, talk to the person to find out their side of the story, talk to all the other folks who were involved. I also sat with the union, talked to the union about the entire situation. And in this case, you know, the union did agree that this was a situation where we needed to terminate the person, and the superintendent recommended that as well. And so then coming back at the end of that and sitting down with the person again to lay all the facts out on the table and terminate that person, that was probably one of the hardest personnel issues I've had to deal with. You know, anytime you have to terminate someone, it's just not pleasant. You don't like to do it. You don't ever want to do it, but it is necessary sometimes, and you need to make sure that you have all your ducks in the row and you move forward.
Thank you. Give an example of how you have either collectively or collaboratively bargained with an employee contract, and what's your philosophy on bargaining?
Yes, so I have been on the bargaining team since 2011. So for the past 9 years, I have been at the table. It's myself and our CFO, our bargaining leader, and our HR person. Those are the 4 of us who really sit at the table. My experience has been working through full book a couple of times, also working through issues that have popped up, obviously working with compensation every single year. My thought on that is that we need to be as collaborative as possible. I know in negotiations, you know, we say we come to the table and we have one side of the table and the other side of the table. And I wish I honestly, and I've said this to all of our leadership, it'd be great to sit at a big round table, you know, and everybody, every other person, and really not talk about, you know, this side and that side and everything on the board in red is the union side and everything in the blue is the district side. You know, we all work together and we all support each other. And we need to do that. And we need to, my thought is we need to come up with solutions to problems. We need to listen to what the union is saying. We need to listen to what teachers and non-instructional folks are saying and what their needs are. We also then need to discuss with them the district's whatever the district needs to talk through with them, make sure that they understand, where our budget is and those types of things, so that we can all work together. I know the latest that we're working on now is, well, with COVID-19, there's a lot of different things that we're working on, but right before that, we started to work on planning time. We were trying to figure out, this planning time has been in our CBA for a long, long time, and we have an opportunity to work together and figure this out, because, you get 50 minutes here and 45 minutes here, and now our classes are 60 minutes or 45 minutes. Is there a different way that we can all come together? Teachers are professionals. They know what they're doing. They can spend their time planning and be effective with that. Now that we have the PLC process, a lot of our teachers, most of our, like to get together in groups and collaborate, and how does that work with unencumbered planning time? So for me, it has been, let's all sit down together and discuss this, and we want to come up with a great plan.
Thank you.
Together.
Can you describe your ability to cultivate a disciplined, safe, and orderly school environment? That's a big question, I know, but I want to make sure we get that in.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Your ability to cultivate a disciplined, safe, and orderly school environment.
Yes. So an example of that this past year, for instance, in our pre-K and first grade area, it seemed to be that the behaviors were escalating, and we were dealing with that quite a bit. So we had to step back and take a look at our PBIS, Positive Behavior Instructional System, especially in our elementary schools. And we went ahead and had training with the teachers again, and also brought in something called conscious discipline for teachers. And so we trained our teachers over the summer in those two areas to kind of revamp the school in our Tier 1 area, so that all of our students understood the routines and the expectations and so on and so forth. Obviously, you're still going to have Tier 2, Tier 3 folks, but I will tell you that when we did that this summer, and then this past year, we really worked through that, and our students, I think our behavior really de-escalated. And in monitoring that, as going around to different schools and seeing what's on the walls, talking about routines, talking with the custodial staff, have you seen a difference, in discipline just in the school? And they even have, and they're on board too. Everyone's on board with the PBI's training. So I think that is one issue. The other is safety issue, created single points of entry in all of our schools. Really tried to have our entrances remodeled with plexiglass and so forth, but also try to make it still look welcoming. Trying to do that, and then teach our kids, our students, what is the routine now when you come to school? How do we operate inside the school? What are the safety issues that we need to be aware of? I think we've done a really good job with that. Spent a considerable amount of money, but we do have the Safe Schools money that we use, and our mental health money that we've used too, for our NTSS piece and the PBIS piece. So.
Thank you. Can you explain your experiences with dealing with different programs like special education, Title I programs, and career tech or at-risk programs?
Yes. So in our ESE department, our funding in our IDA is $7 million, and we put a tremendous amount of training together every single year, and so that our teachers have that training. As you know, now there's the 20-hour requirement on certification, so most of our teachers are going through that. One of the things that we really try to do is make sure that that the PD that we offer our teachers for that 20-hour for their certification is PD that reflects our initiatives in our school district, and making sure that our teachers know what the IEPs say, making sure that they're following those and providing the accommodations that are needed. We also make sure that during IEP meetings, we've had training on how to run those and work with parents on those, since IEPs are a team commitment with the parent. And so we've trained our teachers quite a bit on that. Also with the ESE piece, one thing I noticed with our curriculum department and our ESE department is that all fantastic, wonderful folks, they are all really doing a good job. And when they're out there talking to the teachers, they're doing what they think they should do. And one thing I heard from the teachers was they were a little confused. They heard one thing from our curriculum department folks, and with our pacing guides and what our curriculum was. And then ESE, they're hearing something a little bit different, even though it was great. They're hearing a little bit different. So they're very confused, and how does this go together? So I spent all last year having the ESE department, the curriculum department work together, and they still now continue to do so. They're not working in silos, and they're now on the same page helping our teachers work through those ESE challenges and making sure that we're doing what's best for our students.
Thank you. What's your experience in facilities management and/or construction or growth planning?
Yes. So in St. John's, we've had a lot of growth. We're building schools all the time. We have 2 being built right now. We did get the half-cent sales tax, which has helped us to move forward with our new construction. If we hadn't done that, we wouldn't have been able to move forward. And we're still, overcrowded even with the 2 new schools coming on board. Collecting impact fees, looking at concurrency, pulling all that money in from the developers to help us with that as well, along with the sales tax. And then also, our CFO went to New York recently and picked up some more COPS money so that we could build these 2 schools, about $100 million worth for both schools. Our K-8 school is going to be around $40 million. Our high school is around $75 million. And so financially, we're doing well with that now. We're building our schools. We also buy our own materials during construction so that we don't have to pay sales tax on that, which has, with 2 schools, that'll save us about $1 million. And then along with that, we have the rezoning piece, which we're working through, and then the curriculum side. What are we going to offer? What are we going to have in our schools and in our new high school that we're building? What is the academy going to be? And we had to create the spaces before construction and before design. So we did all of that. So we're just moving along on all aspects, and we'll be open on those 2 schools in 21-22 school year.
Thank you. What's your experience working with charter schools, magnet schools, and private schools?
Yes. So I was the principal of a magnet school in Seminole County. It was a performing arts magnet school, performing arts / pre-IB magnet school in Sanford, Florida. It was a Title I school, 2,100 students. We moved that school from a C to an A in 1 year. A high poverty Title I school, probably around, I think it was around 70% minority. We had to do a lot of things there. I brought the reading program there, and also the writing program, writing across the content area. So I worked in that magnet school, and really I thought we were very successful in that magnet school. As far as charter schools are concerned, we had 5, and we now have 3. 2 have closed because of finances over the last couple of years. We have 3 now that we work with closely. We try to help them with whatever we can help them with. We do provide PD that they can share with us, and we help them when they have questions about finances and also about ESE. That seemed to be a problem. We had to really coach them up on the ESE requirements and make sure that they were doing that. And this particular charter school that we have right now is a Montessori school with about 100 students in it.
One more question. Is there still time? Yeah, I didn't check. What experience have you got? We have our own police department here doing the school resource officers. What did your school do, or what's your experience with your police officers, SROs?
Yes, so we have a very good relationship with the sheriff's office. We've had that for a long, long time. And 3/4 of our school are manned by our sheriff's department deputies. We receive $2 million in safety money that we utilize to pay for that. Still costs us another $1 million out of our own budget, our own general revenue budget. But like I said, we have a great relationship with them. Also, we have 2 resource officers from the St. Augustine Beach Police Department, and 2 of those, each one mans one of our elementary schools. Then we also work with a security company called Allied, and we have around 11, we call them from the Guardian program side of things. We have those security officers, and they are armed, and they are in 11 of our schools. And then we do hire with our resource officers. We hire obviously more than we need to make sure that we have substitutes available and leadership available with our sheriff's office. But we have a fantastic relationship with our police department and our sheriff's office, and they help us and are all over our safety and our testing that we do, our assessor testing, and every single month they're out at the schools going through processes and procedures with our principals and our teachers throughout the year, and we feel very confident with our security.
Thank you.
In St. John's.
Thank you.
Is my time up? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. I know it seems like that's what I feel like ever since I put my feet on the floor this morning.
No, that's great. I know we just had assistant principal interviews, and I try to keep them at 20 minutes. And I tell people, look, we have this many 20 minutes, we move forward. And if you're not done, you're not done. But that's the only way to get through it. I understand that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming back and for
Yes,
applying
ma'am.
again.
Yes, ma'am.
We really appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
We're going to get more questions.
Are we moving out now?
No, we go to the next board member.
Oh, jeez. I'm sorry.
You only get that far.
She's ready to have this over with.
Are we finished?
No. Mr. Robinson.
Thank you. My first question is a follow-up question.
Yes, sir.
To your, my question about the budget. We each got to submit 5 questions.
Yes, sir.
And specifically your answer about hiring associate teachers
Yes, sir.
for $30,000 to team up with certified teachers.
Yes,
Could
sir.
you expound upon that and when that is acceptable and when that is not acceptable?
Yes, I'm glad that you asked about that. I know that was part of the answer to what would you cut in the budget, and I did put that in there back in 2009. Back in 2009, during this recession, I was a principal at the time, but at that time, the Human Resources Department, working with the union, decided to. The executive director of HR had this idea, this associate teacher idea, and talked through it with the union. They both agreed that it was a good idea and put it in the CBA. So it's been in our CBA since 2009. And then when I came in as the Human Resources Associate Superintendent, it was there. And as we would go through the year and talk about it with teachers, union, everything, I've never had any negatives that have come through. So by putting that on here, in my mind, it was, okay, we're trying to find ways to cut the budget or spend less money. This is one of the things that we utilize in St. John's, and it does save money. That's the only reason I put it in there. I'm not married to it. I'm not, if Sarasota County doesn't ever want to talk about it again, I'm fine with that. I was pushing forward something that's been in our CBA for 10 years, and it was simply a suggestion for another way to save money, just like the other 7 or 8 suggestions that I have in there. That's about all the thought process went through there, is how much can we save. But like I said, I am pro teacher. I said it before. I haven't had teachers talk to me about that they didn't like it. If I had, we would have brought it up way before now in St. Johns County to say we need to look at this again. But if that is something that will not work in Sarasota, I am fine with that. Like I said, I'm not married to that. It was just a suggestion, merely just a suggestion. That's all it was. So that's my feeling on that particular book.
Speaking of being married to things, I just want to thank you for bringing.
Oh, yes, this is my wife.
Oh, I thought that was your daughter. I'm sorry. So, What do you think is an optimal range for operating fund balance to be at?
The operating fund balance, I noticed that your policy states 7.5%. You don't want to go below 7.5%.
And we also have a maximum.
And you do, you have a
Yes,
maximum.
so I was asking if you think there should be a range. If so, what would that range be?
Yeah, I think having a fund balance anywhere between the 7.5 or 8% range and probably 15% is a good range. I know in St. John's at one point, right around the recession, we had built it up to around 25 to 28%, which was a good thing because it helped us when we had the recession and we didn't need to release employees. We were able to use that in a temporary fashion. But I think that range is a good range. I think when you start getting up around the 20% range, then, it might be too high and we need to, utilize that in different ways. But getting it down below the 10% range, somewhere between 7.5 and 12% is a healthy place to be in case something comes up like a hurricane or COVID or some way that you need to use money quickly in an emergency situation. I think we need to at least have the 7.5.
What do you think the proper role for an internal auditor is?
Proper role for an internal auditor. I think that person should, pull all of the information that they need to pull and look through that information. And when they find something that is a red flag, they need to obviously talk to the superintendent and talk to those folks in the departments in which the red flag might have occurred so that we can, I'm sorry.
No, nothing.
So that we can then discuss it and fix the problems. I think their role is very important in that we rely on them to look through all of our paperwork and let us know if we are out of line anywhere.
I think my time is up, but I had one more question.
No,
but-
you're fine.
Oh, I'm fine? Can I? Oh, I thought it was 5 minutes. I did it
No.
wrong.
That's me. I have 5 minutes.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. What are your thoughts? So we have equal funding, equalized funding, equitable funding. So my question is about equitable funding.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about equitable funding?
I think equitable funding is very important. I can tell you when I was in Seminole County, for instance, and I was working at the Title I school, 2100 in that school, the superintendent in Seminole County really made sure that our Title I schools had what we needed as far as technology is concerned, extra money for reading programs, other folks, interventionists, reading coaches, math coaches, those types of things. So we always received a little bit more money. When I was in more of an affluent school as a principal, I understood that. I'll give me my budget, I'll work within my budget, but I know that more money needs to go toward the areas where you might have to purchase more human resources and instructional resources. So I think that we need to always keep our eye on all of our schools to make sure that they are equitably funded. And if we are missing the mark somewhere, we need to correct that.
Okay. Thank you. When do you think it's a proper time to use COPS for funding, and when is it a proper time to? You mentioned the 1 penny, the half penny sales tax, and when do you think it's a proper time to go out for a referendum for additional funding?
Yes. So I think that the referendum for extra funding is something that, at least for us, has helped us to front money in certain circumstances so that we do not have to borrow as much money as we would have had to borrow through COPS. For us, we have quite a few loans that are going to sunset in 2021. We are almost capped out in that sense to where we could only borrow a certain amount. So the surtax, the $20 million, we thought it would be 13, it ended up being $20 million a year that's coming in from with all of our tourists and so forth, which has been fantastic. That has really helped us so that we do not have to borrow as much, which is great because once it sunsets in 2021, we'll have much more credit. Right now, we had such a small gap that $100 million that we did borrow, it would have been much larger if we did not have the sales tax to utilize in that sense.
Speaking of millage, what do you think? So we're able to go up to a higher millage than where we're at by going through referendum. What would you think would be optimal millage rate to be?
Are you talking about the operations side or
The
capital
operation side.
Yeah, I think,
What max at the capital? I'm talking about the operational.
yes. I know you have a 1 mil, and I know that brings about $66 million because you have $60 billion in property taxes or property values. I think that's a fantastic amount, having that 1 mil. In St. John's, on the capital side, we have the 1.5. We have the surtax for the capital side. We do not have any referendum on the operations side. The only thing that concerns me there is non-recurring money. And when you start using it for recurring expenses, makes me a little nervous. But I think if we do it right and we plan it correctly, we can still use, because I know you utilize a lot of it for salaries and the arts here in Sarasota County, and it's very important that we continue to get the referendum because of that fact. We never want to lower people's salaries because we didn't get the referendum. So having a plan B or having a backup plan to that in case that were to happen, not saying that it will, but in case it does, is very important. But in the meantime, I think it's very important that we move forward and try to make sure that we keep that.
What are your thoughts on zero-based budgeting?
Yeah, so, every year we bring the principals in to go through their entire human resources roster. And we look at what money they have, what money they're spending to make sure that we don't overspend. By doing that, we feel that is more of a zero-based situation. Having the principals start all over again and our departments start all over again, look at where we got, because our initiatives change. Our initiatives change every single year, and we need to make sure that we're going back to say, are we just spending money because we've been spending that same money for 20 years in that area, or do we need to go back and wipe it clean and start over again and make sure that we're using it for the right purposes and the right initiatives? So then back to the principals in the schools, as I mentioned in my paperwork before, overspending for us by one person at every school would cost us around $3 million. And we were able to, through our staffing committee that we created, that first year we saved $1.8 million because we were overspending in certain areas. And so I think from that standpoint, zero-based budgeting is a good thing.
So we have an unlimited need and unlimited resources. What do you think the optimal number that we should be getting from the state for funding for students per student?
Per student amount? You're talking about the BSA piece or the total?
Total.
I think you all are around 8,200 per student. I know we're around 7,600 per student. The fact that you have the 1 mil on the operating side helps that. I think that brings you up to about 10,000 per student. I think that's a good amount. I think 10,000 is a good amount compared to what we are looking at as 7,600, and what we do with our 7,600, and what you all are doing with your 10,000 basically per student allocation.
There's a big gap between our district and your district for free and reduced lunch.
Yes.
How would you envision that showing up in the budget? How would you budget differently here than you have in your county?
Yeah, so our Title I budget is around $3 million, and your Title I budget's around $8 million, because you have 45% free and reduced compared to our 21% free and reduced lunch. I think utilizing that money to, first of all, decide what percentage you want for each school to be called a Title I school. I know we just went through that. We had 8 schools that we called Title I schools because we were at 45% and above in each one of those schools. We decided to knock that back to 4 schools. So you have to be at 65 to 70% so that we could take that $3 million in Title I and place it in the 4 schools instead of spreading across the 8 schools. So I think that $8 million, and looking at your 45%, and in each school, how many schools do you have that are truly considered Title I, and where do you put that percentage, 50%, 60%, so that you are really spending the money in the right place, and it makes a difference when you're putting more money in the places that you definitely need it.
So now we have a minimum pay for teachers, but what do you think what would be your goal for what the average salary of a teacher would be if you were the superintendent?
So the average salary, I know in St. John's, our average salary is around $45,000 with benefits right around 60 to 65. I think having an average salary around 55 is a great place to be. I think you all are in the 50s, they're low 50s as far as an average salary. I think that's a good place to be. At the same time, I know our teachers work really hard. They do a great job, and we need to give them whenever we can.
So what would you do specifically to recruit and retain good quality staff and teachers?
Yeah. So with recruitment, I think it's good to have a recruitment committee that works on that. And I created one in St. John's, and that committee is fantastic, made up of wonderful people. They do a great job. And then basically we sent them out to all the different colleges. And one of the things that I wanted to do there was, and I went a few times too, is to have a presentation on how to apply, how to write a resume, how to interview, those types of things. And we would go in a day early to the colleges and talk to the teachers, and they would let us come in and teach their class and help their students, juniors and seniors who were in education, how to do that process. Well, that really helped us, because then the next day they would have the job fair, and we were there, and everybody wanted to come to our table and work for us. I think it's all about building those relationships. I think also it could be kind of like when you know, with college athletics, you're looking at a high schooler when they're a sophomore or a junior. We need to look at our college students and say, look, you know, let's find the juniors. Let's talk to the teachers, find the juniors who are outstanding, and call them and keep in contact with them. And so when they graduate, maybe they're ready to come to us. Also, having recruitment fairs at our school site has been fantastic. You have to have multiple fairs, and getting our minority population, our community involved in that also has helped us with minority students who aren't sure they want to move to St. Augustine, but that has helped quite a bit. Retention, because I think you also said retention. You know, when I was in my doctoral program, a lot of the research that I read about retention was that teachers want to feel like they belong, that they have a purpose. There's a reason to be there. They want to feel like they contribute and be recognized. And I think we definitely need to do all of those things, which means give them a voice, ask them for their input, recognize them when they're doing great things, let them take risks, and be behind them and support them 100%. And then be able to feel a real sense of belonging, that they need to be at school, not because I'm telling them to be there, but because they might let down their neighbor who's working with them in a collaborative group. They are needed. They need to be there. And that seems to be the biggest way to retain.
As a superintendent, how would you
Ms.
define
Robinson.
success? Oh,
Sorry.
I got the question under the buzzer.
You got that in, but that's good job. Sorry. Mrs. Goodwood? No. I think you're next. Pardon me? Okay, Mrs. Ziegler. I got your page last, so
No, I apologize.
I had to shuffle
No.
you in here.
Big questions here. Well, thank you for being here again today. So mine, I want to talk about leadership, and how would you define or describe your leadership style?
Yeah. So I am a big proponent of bringing everyone together and asking a lot of questions and getting input from everyone that I can. And that would be district folks, community folks, teachers, principals, students, having a student focus group that I meet with once a month, even faith-based groups once a month, the community leaders, just to get the input, to have a feel for what's going on. But I like to gather input to make a really good decision and do the right thing. Once I make the decision and I give the project to my team or a team, I am not one that micromanages. I expect our experts on that team to do a great job and come through with the project. Now, I will, every few days, follow up and monitor to see how things are going. How can I help you? Do you need any help? What resources do you need? You know, ask all of those questions to make sure that we're moving along and we're keeping things on the front burner. But I am definitely a proponent of having our experts in a certain area work on projects and then following through to make sure that I understand it. Now, I'm also a person that I always feel like I need to have my hands in it somewhat for me to fully understand it. And so I will get into it a little bit, but not to micromanage, just to really understand it and make sure that we're moving in the right direction.
Okay, great. Thank you. So what is your greatest professional disappointment, and what did you learn from it?
I think one of the biggest disappointments was when I was working in the HR department and we were switching our application system over to another system. And so we had our business system, and part of that, there was a little part that could be used as an application system for HR. And and our other one was outdated. So I was trying to run both of those at the same time to make sure that the new one would come on board before you jettison the old one. And it was taking a long time. Next thing I know, we were 2 years in and trying to customize it. And the company was out of California, and so you couldn't call them when you got there in the morning, and then things would happen, and then you call them, and then, it just wasn't working out. And the company actually went through a lot of changes. And so we'd always have to come back and start talking to the new folks about what we've done in the past couple of weeks and where we are. And so it was just, and the HR folks were getting very, I don't want to say upset, but discouraged because they were putting all this work in, and they're looking at me, Asplin, what are you doing? What are you going to do with this? Help us with this, And finally, they worked so hard. And after about 2 years, we were going into 2.5 years, we reached a point where I was practically at the point where we were going to sit in the parking lot with folders and help our principals and help our people who are applying. And we were just not going to do that. So I had to make the decision to go with a canned product, a state-of-the-art canned product that we could tweak here and there to make it our own. And so we did that. Once we did that, our folks customized it. It worked out really, really well, and everybody was very happy. And I think the part that I just wish I had pulled the trigger a lot sooner on that. I think that was my thing. That's what I learned. Don't drag your folks. It was so much time wasted and discouragement that it was just ridiculous that I let it go that long, but I was so hopeful it was going to work out. But anyway, it all worked out in the end, but that's what I would change.
Very good. How do you hold yourself and your staff accountable?
My team that I work with on a daily basis are the 3 associate superintendents. They were all very successful principals. I like to hire principals into my teams. And actually 4 of them, there's also a senior director. And they know that I have high expectations. They already have their own high expectations, but they know that I do too. And they know that I expect for us to meet timelines, meet deadlines. I expect for the work to be fantastic, wonderful, flawless, something that we can bring to the board and say, here's what we've been working on based on what the priorities are that you've talked to us about. I don't ever want to be in front of the board and present something that's not very good. And so for me, I hold myself accountable to make sure that we are producing great products and that I understand it and I can explain it and we can move forward with it. And then I expect the same out of my team. And they know that I'm not going to micromanage them, as I said, but they know I'm going to follow up, and they know that we need to make sure that we stay on the timeline, and there's a great expectation there.
Trying to think here. So if you can talk, so communication style, can you talk me through what role you believe communication has on being an effective leader? And then please give me a specific example.
Yes, so I think that we need to over-communicate. At least that's what I think. As far as communication is concerned, you can't communicate enough. Making sure that no one is working in silos is very important. Making sure that everybody's coming together and knows what the plan is and knows where we all are and how it affects different departments, very important. I will tell you, as principals, when you come into the district office, we've all gone through it because I've seen myself go through it and our team members go through it. When you're running your school, yes, the district knows what you're doing, but you're running your school. And a lot of the decisions you're making and the communication you're doing, it's very compact and you can control that quite a bit. And then when you move to the district office and you make a decision and you forgot one person, that blows up in your face. You have to make sure that you have everybody at the table, everybody understands it. Even if you think they're not going to be involved in it, somehow they're involved in it. And you need to make sure that they're there. And then communicating out to the community is huge, making sure that we let the community know and the schools know where we're going. And then also with board members, making sure that all of you know what is going on way ahead of any initiative, being able to see what's right around the corner so that you're not getting caught by surprise by your constituents. You want to be able to answer your constituents. You want to be able to talk to them. You need to know what's going on ahead of time, especially things that are going to make it in the news. So for me, it's daily communication. It's daily communication with all of you, with my team, and then with cabinet at least once a week to make sure we are all on the same page, and then working with our community chief, our chief of communications, to make sure the right things are going out to the community at the right time, and it's specific and clear, and so that we can make a difference for our students.
Thank you. How am I on time? I was going to set a clock, but
Go
I'll
ahead.
keep going.
You're good.
I think I asked this question similarly, so I'm going to switch over to, particularly as we face the COVID-19 unknowns.
Yes.
I believe most people in a leadership position are finding that there doesn't seem to be a good solution on either side. Talk me through how you would address, you can speak to that particular challenge, or in general, when really you are set with a task of making a decision where there's just not a clear path on what the best path forward is.
Yes, and I will tell you that has been new for all of us. At least we have some sort of path or something at the end that we know where our goal is and where we're moving. This has been all over the board. We have spent a lot of time, and I think it's important to spend a lot of time talking to and discussing with principals, with groups of teachers, with groups of students and parents and community leaders. I know yesterday our superintendent met with all of our union reps at one time to talk about all of these things. The difficult part is you have to, in this case with COVID, you have to really come up with 3 different plans that you might have to move to depending on what the spread looks like. And so that's what we've done in St. Johns County, is come up with 3 different plans, which is the regular plan if things are good. Then we'll have the middle plan, which is if we have moderate spread, and that's more of a hybrid situation with brick and mortar and online. Mm-hmm. And then the last plan would be the one we just ended the school year with everybody's out. But then just creating that plan is one thing, but then to figure out all the logistics behind that is a whole nother problem. Moving from brick and mortar to online at the end of the year, we thought that was difficult at the time. That was very easy compared to what we're doing right now. And so coming up with the logistics, helping people understand how we're going to be safe, how are we going to arrive, how are we going to dismiss, what does lunch look like, what does transitions look like, what is the classroom going to look like, if I'm in a portable, what does that look like, how are we going to drop students off, what are the buses, how are we going to have our routes run, food service, how are we going to run food service? It's going to be totally different.
Can I start? And just for that, where all of those decisions, that's where I wanted to kind of get a sense of who are you pulling in, or what do you envision pulling in, to make those decisions?
Okay. So great question, thank you. So I have been leading the task force on this, and in that task force we have every department, including parents and our union reps. And so we have, I want to say I have 30 people on that task force, and we are talking through every single bit of that. Especially when you look at transportation, for instance. They need to have some sort of decision to understand routes that I can't give them because I don't know how many parents are going to ride the bus or not ride the bus at this point in time. And so we have created many surveys that we have put out. We've collected all that data. We've talked through all of that data in coming up with our plan and creating our plan for logistics. So I think, getting all those folks involved. The other thing is I had parents in the other day, 2 weeks ago, from one school that's a pretty overcrowded school, and those parents were very concerned about how we're going to do the logistics, and I would ask questions and we would talk through it. It's a very good meeting, very positive, and they gave us a lot of really good information. But then then at the end I said, okay, well, would you be favoring this with this? Well, 2 people said yes, 1 person said no. and there was a group of 3 people. Well, then would you like this? 2 people said yes to that, and 1 person said no. So it doesn't matter what you create. Someone doesn't like it, other people love it. And so we're in that situation too, where, which way do you go? Do you go with the majority and what they love, or what? And how do you mitigate for those who don't want to send their students to a brick and mortar school, even when we think we can send all of our kids to school? So that's been really tough. We've been working through it. I think as long as you're keeping everybody involved, and our parents have been awesome. They've been really good. Thank you for taking the time to do this. But we expect them to give us their input, and they will. They'll give it, and I appreciate it and respect it, and we need to utilize it as we make our decisions, and we do. And I think our parents know that, and they know we can only do so much. So everybody's really working together on this.
Very good.
Thank
I yield
you.
my time if I'm not. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Goodwin?
Dr. Asplin, I want to thank you for being here this morning. It's great to see you again.
Thank you.
And my role is to talk about academics,
Okay.
something we all love.
Yes, ma'am.
That's the most important thing, right?
Yes, ma'am.
My first question is, what sort of unique, creative, inspired, out-of-the-box type of idea did you implement that saw results in improving student achievement?
Okay. So, like I had mentioned earlier, that PLC process that we really put in place over the last couple of years, and I know people talk about PLC, but we really initiated and put it in place. And at first, it was tough. Our teachers, it was more of a compliance thing. Now that we've been in it for 3 years, most of our teachers really love it and couldn't see any other way of if they could not get together and collaborate, they'd have a really, really hard time with that. They love it. So one of the things that has really promoted is for them to create common assessments, common formative assessments, looking at data together, deciding which standards their students are not, which standards that they are missing and having a hard time with, and using that data to also share students. So we implemented in master schedules, especially in elementary, the intervention block. So there's a block of time where students or teachers actually share students depending on what their need is and what their area of weakness might be, pairing that up with a teacher whose strength is that. And that has seemed to work out really, really well. And those teachers come back together and talk about that and revise their plans and move back out. They switch groups all the time because students then are okay, and then there's another group of students with another problem. So that has worked out well. Also, in our content area specialists, with our content area specialists in our curriculum department, we've deployed them. They are going out in the schools every single day and helping teachers constantly over the last couple of years. And at first, again, teachers were like, don't really want you coming around here, why don't you just leave me alone? And now they ask for the content area specialist, please come. What do you mean they can't come? They're going to another school. No, they need to come to our school and meet with our team. I think that has really helped. And one example I can give you is, let's just say a high school example. In watching a PLC being conducted, 10th grade English teachers, for instance, and they were working through the writing process. And they really did. Even in high school, they split up their students by what their students' needs were, some in elaboration, some with topic sentences, some with the essay structure. And then they were able to, so when the students come to the class, then they go back out to these other classes and they move around and they share so that they hear from a different teacher. It's not even their teacher of record, it's a different teacher. But the teacher of record is okay with that, with their VAM score, because they know that teacher's awesome and is going to help them. And so everybody working together, and the fact that we put that all in place, I think that initiative really, really works for our instructional program and helps our students quite a bit.
Eliminating the achievement gap
Yes.
is a must.
Yes.
What approaches would you pursue?
I think that, in eliminating the achievement gap, just like any of the other students, really, we try to obviously drill down to the individual student, have an individual plan, make sure that they understand their data, make sure that they understand where they need to be, and work on it from an individual standpoint. With the achievement gap, the piece that seems to work for us, and trust me, we have much more work to do in that. I think everybody does, but in working through that, understanding and building a relationship with that individual and their family and understanding their environment, that is very, very important. Students want to know that you know what their life is like, that you care for them, that you're trying to do the right thing for them, you're trying to set them up on a plan, and you're following up with them. I think that speaks a lot. Now, as far as the achievement gap groupings, groups of subgroups. We need to make sure we're tracking that as a whole, making sure we understand what's going on. But if we're going to do anything about closing the achievement gaps, it has to be individualized with the students as much as possible, and/or small group instruction. And as you know, with the ESSA, with the Every Student Succeeds Act, that's a big deal with subgroups. And the federal point index that's coming down the line, I think that's going to be part of grading schools in the future. And I think we need to pay very, very close attention. And if you look at all of your schools, I know we have too, if you look at all of your schools, fantastic schools, A and B schools all the way down the line, when you start looking at subgroups and those 11 categories that we have for FSA, for instance, and how many are below the 41%, which is what we're going to need to be with the new ESSA piece, you'd be surprised. And I think principals are looking at that. I would hope they are. If not, we need to bring that to our attention because if we're working on those individual smaller things, the big picture takes care of itself and the scores go up and the students do well with their achievement gap.
What measurements have you used that are outside of test scores if needed to measure student achievement, and why do you use these alternative measures?
I think one of the most important pieces is the formative piece. So not the high stakes testing, not the standardized type testing necessarily, but the formative piece. And it would be teachers building their own common formatives together in their groups, like I said, with the PLC groups. And then also we use iReady. I know you guys do. You use iReady as well. And with iReady, it's nice because we give a test in the fall, and then one in the middle of the year, and then one at the end of the year. I was looking at your iReady data, and you had first test data and second test data, and you guys were on a great track. Everything's moving in a really good direction, and then COVID hit. Same with us, we did too. But we do then pinpoint certain schools that maybe are having a little bit of an issue to try and drill down and help them and find out what resources from the principal, what resources they might need. But I think, working with them on the formative at that level and fixing problems before we get to the end, because once you get to the end, and I know you've heard this before, it's an autopsy, right? It's you can't do anything about it except look at it, going into next year. You have to really be checking that formative data as we go, and the students and the families, parents, they need to know what that looks like as well so that we can continue. You don't want to miss a whole week just because you didn't look at data. So we need to make sure that we're doing that with the formative pieces.
How has your district made support services an integral part of student achievement? Describe your role in this.
Yeah, so support services, the big one in our districts is the mental health piece. And I know we have introduced the 5-hour mental health piece. I know you have too, and we put that in place last year. The big thing that we did during this year, though, was created a plan to embed that into our curriculum. And so with our social and emotional learning pieces, connecting social and emotional learning standards with our character counts standards, our character education standards, matching those together, and then also with the 5-hour mental health piece. We've done that. We've also worked with many different agencies. We have Flagler Care Connect, Flagler Hospital, and us, and the community college and community schools, I believe. Those 4, we will all work together so that parents can go to one place, the common Flagler Care Connect area, and be able to deal with one person to figure out what the issue might be so that they can go to the right agency. So we've really made that more efficient and effective for the parent. That has seemed to work really, really well. We also have an assist program where we're helping our homeless students, our students who are unaccompanied youth. Sometimes we have to pay for a cab. Sometimes we have to pay for a night in a hotel. So, that money is not taxpayer money. We do raise money throughout the year for that as donations from folks. They also donate clothes and shoes and everything else, and we have it in a certain spot. We have a couple people that's what they do. They work on that. Then we have our wraparound schools. We have 2 of those, and we have dental and medical and things like that for our students in those schools. So we have a lot of things that we have in place to help our students with that. My role in that, there's an associate superintendent who was on my team who's responsible for that whole department.
How do you balance the needs of special populations like ESE students, ELL students, and students traditionally referred to as gifted and talented? What have you done to address the diverse needs of student populations in your district?
Yes, so, yes, I mean, everyone, what I'm big on is we need to look at the individual. So, yes, we have all these groups, but within that group, what is it about that individual? What do they need? Can we drill all the way down to their basic need and build that relationship and understand that and support them in that need? You know, with ESE students and looking at the IEPs and looking at accommodations, making sure we have the right accommodations and that we're following through on that, and making sure that the principals are talking to their teachers to see what they need and what support they might need to make sure that we are meeting those accommodations. I think, you know, sometimes with everything going on and the number of students that we have, sometimes you can miss that because you're doing so many things. We really need to make a conscious effort, be strategic in helping students with their individual needs, whether they're in this subgroup, that subgroup, or another subgroup.
You're good. Thank you. Me.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us about a time where you recognized an internal communication gap within the staff of your district. What did you do to address the gap, and what was the outcome? And explain the methods of communication you used and how you measured the outcome.
Okay.
Want me to repeat that?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us about a time when you recognized an internal communication gap within the staff of your district. What did you do to address the gap, and what was the outcome?
Okay. One of the gaps that I noticed, well, I mentioned one earlier between curriculum and ESE, but another one was a gap between testing and accountability and curriculum. And that gap existed in that the curriculum department, they do a really, really good job of attacking standards and supporting teachers and working through that with their pacing guides, the essential standards, and all of that with teachers. Our testing that we do, because we have a couple of common district tests that we still utilize about halfway through the year, besides iReady and so forth. And then we have our end of the year common district test for all those courses that are not FSA courses or third-party testing. And those tests were not aligned with our standards like they should be. And in talking with the associate superintendent over testing and accountability, and talking with our associate superintendent over curriculum and instruction, we needed to come together in some fashion. And so what I did was I had both groups get together, say, okay, what do we need to do to align this process? It's driving everybody crazy, and we can't have that. And one department's not listening to the other department. And how are we going to work through that? Very good conversations. We had to work through that. We had to build relationships between departments. Departments needed to know what each other's department was doing, what their job was, what their responsibility was. And so at the end of the day, we were able to send our teachers in to help build some of these assessment questions or create banks of questions that then our accountability department could choose from to build the tests. And then we send the tests over to the curriculum department to look at, and our curriculum specialists go through each one of them, make sure that they are correct and they are aligned to the standards. And if there's anything that looks a little wishy-washy, send it back and say, no, in testing department, we need you to do this instead. And all of that needs to be timely. Everybody needs to have deadlines for that because we're all doing a lot of different things. Now everybody works really well together. It's seamless. The teachers are much happier because now when they get the test, that particular test from the district, the common assessment, it looks correct. It's not off. It's what they've been teaching. It's not something, questions that they had no idea were ever going to be on the test. Not that we're teaching to the test, but at least we're in the ballpark. And so getting that together and making sure that that's all aligned, that was huge. And you're talking about two different departments that are very proud of what they do and how they do it. And this is what we've been doing for 20 years. Well, you know what? Now, how are we going to work together? And we had to come up with a whole new way, a whole new process of working together on that.
That's great. What are your ideas about engaging families who are inexperienced with participating or have had negative experiences with education?
Engaging families who have had negative experiences, yes. I think that making sure that we invite those parents to the school, and sometimes they'll call me directly, for instance, and sometimes it's easy to say, well, you know what, that's a school issue, you need to talk to your principal. And I try to do that, I try to respect the principal. And then there's some times where you just know, I need to bring this person in, they need to feel the love of our district at the moment. And then we can point them in the right direction and move forward. And so bringing them in under your wings, so to speak, and talk to them about the district and where our heart is and how we want to support you is very, very important. Also listening to all of their concerns and making sure that you understand why they're hesitant about our school district. Then once getting to a point where you have built some sort of relationship and they feel comfortable and trust you, then moving on to the next person or the next group, especially if it's a school, let's go to the school, let's sit down, let's talk to principal. You love the principal, you love the teachers, let's all get together and talk about this. When I was at Millennium Middle School, I had that problem. I had parents that did not want to come to the school. They never met me, they never met a lot of people, but they had a bad school experience when they were in school. Parents did. And they were just not ready to come to school. And then a lot of them are working all the time and they can't come in. And one of the things that I did there, a couple things, but one was I did go out to the churches and I met the pastors because I knew everybody went to church. And I built relationships with the pastors. And when you build a relationship and you become friends with a pastor, and then the parents know that you truly are a friend of the pastor and you are trustworthy and you want to work together, all of a sudden people want to talk to you because they trust you, because their pastor said, yep, you can go and talk and you're going to have a great relationship there. And then also in times of need, and when I was at Millennium Middle School, we had a very high poverty rate. Once a year around Thanksgiving, we would get turkeys together, for instance. And first year, we bought a lot of turkeys, and then we would go and hand deliver the turkeys at the house. And there were quite a few houses that I went in and met the people, met the parents, and realized they didn't have an oven. They didn't have a stove. And so then I, going into that next year, made sure I bought pre-cooked turkeys. So it's things like that I didn't know you wouldn't have a stove in your house, right? But when you get there and you realize that, it's a whole different picture for you and understanding the way a person lives in their environment so that you can then build that relationship with them and they can trust you. And that's the key, is building a relationship and trust.
So you yourself have parents come into your office to speak to you?
Yes.
Just want to make sure I'm clear.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Had it many times in our ESE department, a lot of parents who are concerned about different areas of ESE, let's say autism, for instance. And we have quite a few parents who do a lot of research and, are very educated in certain areas. And I welcome them to come in. Maybe they're going to tell me something that I don't know. Right.
So you're really hands-on.
I'm hands-on, yes. And I build those relationships, and then that seems to follow through at the school site as well. And I talk to the principal and tell the principal what I did and what's been going on, where we are with things. So here's where you need to go with that. And then it just it seems to work out and build trust. And then sometimes even when things are going along really, really, really well with the school and the principal, I'll get that call from that parent, hey, it's me again, and I'm having this problem this time, what should I do? But it's a whole different conversation than the last time that we had a conversation. And everybody's trying to work together and work through problems and so on and so forth. What I do like is that most of our parents, when they come forward with a problem, like I said, they're going to lay it out there and make sure that you understand what that problem is. but most of them also try to bring some sort of solution. They're just not there to beat you over the head with a hammer. They're here to say that here's my problem and here's some solutions. What do you think? And I really appreciate that about most of our parents. And that's how our conversations go. What can we do about it? You know, how can we work together on this? And I don't know, it always seems to come out great.
How would you develop an understanding of the complexities of our school system by the public and ensure that the public be informed on important matters?
Can you repeat that one more time? Please, can you repeat that?
I'm sorry, it's a long question. How would you develop an understanding of the complexities of our school system by the public and ensure that the public be informed on important matters?
Yeah. I think if I am selected as your next superintendent, it is going to be very important to go out in the community and have community conversations, so to speak. They need to get to know me, I need to get to know them, and I need to listen to the concerns and the challenges and the positives and everything in each of the different areas of the district. And I know they're all different. Even though we're one district, there's different needs around the entire district. I foresee every single night going somewhere at some school or some area that parents can come together, or teachers or school-based folks to come together and just have conversations so that I can listen and understand, you know, what's going on in their school, in their particular area, and what needs to be addressed. So I can bring it back to cabinet, for instance, and talk through that and find out where we are with certain things and what we need to do, and maybe we can fix those. And we also need to make sure we communicate that out really, really well so that parents know that I and maybe some other district leadership members might be in a certain location to listen to your concerns. Make sure you're there. Please, please, please be there. And if not, you know, make sure you email me. I give everybody my cell phone number. Anybody that needs to call me, they can do that on their cell phone, on my cell phone. And I would rather know up front and know what's coming than to find out on the back end and try to fix a mess. It's much easier to know it on the front end and work it out and fix it on the front end.
One more. Presenting information in a highly charged situation and to a variety of groups is part of your job. Give an example of how you have encountered opposition and how you dealt with the resulting situation.
Okay. The first part of that, can you ask that one more time? I'm sorry.
That's just for like a present. Presenting information in a highly charged situation to a variety of groups is a part of the superintendent's job.
Yes.
Give an example of how you have encountered opposition and how you have dealt with the resulting situation.
Yeah. One example would be high-stakes testing. A few years ago, we had many parents and teachers and school-based folks talk to us about the fact that we had too many high-stakes testing. So we had the third-party tests. We had one at least every 9 weeks. That was a common district exam. We were loaded. And I agree, we were. It was good for our progress monitoring piece, and we thought that that would really help our students, which it does, but we were way overboard. And so we heard that, and again, I created a task force made up of all different stakeholders, including teachers, school-based folks, community members, parents, students were on that task force as well. And we talked through all the pros and cons of reducing the number of tests and which tests we could reduce. And we put out surveys. We had many responses that came back, and we were able to work through that plan. And then the superintendent made a video of himself talking through that plan and how we were reducing our high-stakes testing. Everybody was thrilled about that, obviously, but we still had just enough to make sure that we were progress monitoring correctly to keep our students going in the right direction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very concise.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any additional information that you would like to share with the board?
The one thing I would like to share is, let me grab it here. I just wanted to very quickly go through my core beliefs.
You have 5 minutes.
Okay,
so.
My core beliefs, so you understand my heart, where I am, what I think about. You know, one thing I will tell you, I am a uniter. I'm a person that likes talking to people and working through concerns, as you could probably tell from a lot of my questions. I think that it's very important for us to be supportive of teachers and supportive of students and parents, everyone, so that we can all work together. I mean, there are a lot of problems, and there are big problems out there. But there is nothing that we can't overcome by coming together. Every single time we've ever had a problem, when you come together in a group and walk through that, we are always able to find a good solution for our students and everybody involved. So I feel strongly about that. But some of my core beliefs, really quickly, I know I have probably 4 minutes at this point. And I'm going to just read these. The superintendent is responsible for establishing an environment of respect, trust, honesty, transparency, and unity, promoting authentic collaboration among the school board, the district leadership team, and the superintendent. The superintendent should be characterized by ethical example and bold servant leadership. The servant has the key responsibility to proactively inform the school board of any and all issues in a timely manner, resulting in no surprises or miscommunication. The superintendent is responsible for promoting a culture and climate of positivity and vision that promotes authentic collaboration throughout the school district. Parents, community members, and business partners should be encouraged to participate and provide valued input. It is the job of the district leadership and departments to provide resources and fully support principals, faculty, and staff. And finally, all school district decisions must ultimately be made through the lens of providing the best education experience and opportunities for all of our students, and to persistently seek improvement. And those are my core beliefs that I live by, and I think it's very important. I think it's very important that we lead by example from the district level. And I think it's very important that you all and I myself are on the same page, working together collaboratively with communication every day to make sure that you know what's going on. I know where you stand so that we can move forward correctly. And again, be proactive, do the right thing on the front end and not clean up messes on the back end.
One of the things I noticed is that you have parents and community members plus staff on every one of your task force. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. And the and union representation.
Do you have any questions for us?
I think the questions I have for you, maybe for tomorrow in our individual, I wanted to just talk to you about your priorities and what your thoughts are, what you think challenges are, and what concerns might be, more on an individual basis.
Okay.
I think right now I'm not sure how much more time we have.
I just wanted to give you,
Yeah, thank you.
obviously,
Thank
we're
you.
on time.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I really want to thank you for your interest and participation in the process. This evening, you'll be participating in a modified meet and greet using the live stream video format. Tomorrow, you will meet individually with each board member for our one-on-one interview. And please let FSBA staff know if you have any questions or concerns about anything.
All right.
And I really greatly appreciate you coming in, being part of this interview process.
Well, thank you very
And
much.
thanks
I
with the-
really appreciate your time. Thank
With
you.
the COVID, it's even
Yes.
more important with COVID the way we
That's
are.
right.
But thank you.
Madam Chair, could we ask that those core beliefs that you seem to have it written down?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you pass those to Kathy? We've got a copy machine in the back room.
Were they in your interview packet?
I actually made you each a specific packet that
Yes,
includes
it's in
those.
our interview packet.
And I
So
will-
they added to it, okay.
I
Yes.
have them in here. I can.
No, they're in our packet. I know where
Okay,
they
great.
are. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
You too.
First and be on your way.
I don't see it.
I thought I read it last night.
No, we don't have that. No, I
We don't have them?
don't think so. No.
Andrea? Could you ask Dr. Asplin to give us copies of his core beliefs? I thought it was in our packet, but it isn't.
I think he was referencing a packet he's going to be giving you tomorrow in the interview, but I'll have him get that piece today.
Okay, thank you. No.
I've been,
We are, we start again at 10
Caroline.
o'clock.
Caroline,
Oh, 10. Oh, I don't give
you
breaks.
actually have 5 more minutes of questions for you.
I was good.
I thought that went well. What do you think? I thought that went very well.
I thought that went really well. Thank you, everybody. It was great.
Okay, let's see who I need to get signed in and how.
Hi, Brandon.
Me.
Oh, we're ordering lunch?
So I can have it here because you only have an hour.
Should come up and sit up here.
Bill, can you confirm those mics are on?
Gotta be right. Got it.
Welcome, Dr. Peter Licata. It's a pleasure to see you today. I'd like to introduce the board members to you, or let our board members introduce themselves to you. I'm Caroline Zucker. I am lucky to be chair of the board this year. Shirley?
Shirley Brown, Vice Chair.
Good morning, Bridget Ziegler.
Morning.
Jane Goodwin.
Eric Robinson.
And the key staff in the room is Craig Meniglia and our Assistant Superintendent, Mitzi Cochran, and our COO is Jody Dumas. And the other people, most important, is Kathy Tompkins, our administrative assistant, who keeps us all in line.
I got to go by your office. I messed some things up when I went by. You weren't there.
We have 90 minutes for our board interview this morning. You will have 5 minutes to provide an opening statement. Each board member will ask a series of questions based on operations, business and finance, personnel, leadership, instructional excellence, board, staff, and community relations. And then each board member is allocated 15 minutes and is prepared to ask up to 5 questions. And you will have time at the end for final thoughts. Okay? Now, Mrs. Brown.
Oh, doesn't he get to do an introduction?
Oops, I did it again. Yes. You have 5 minutes for an introduction, please.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here in front of you all. It's a special place, Sarasota. I've spent the last couple of weeks rehearsing and memorizing and writing down thoughts and realized that an opening statement, if it's not coming from my heart and from my head, I might not be in a good place. So it's easy. I was the son of a teacher. And in an early time in my life, I realized the impact, positive impact, how a teacher can have on a community. It gave me the energy to become a teacher as well. As some of you know, that I was a contractor prior. And when I lost my father, I knew I had to become a teacher and have that impact. It was then I realized in the classroom that my leadership was about coaching and about teaching and about giving others the opportunity that he had given. Public schools are in a state of flux right now. It's very unpredictable. And we have to be ready to pivot. We have to be ready to turn. We have to be ready to make some great decisions on an unknown. The next superintendent of Sarasota County has to be an innovator, has to lead with every voice being heard, but has to be a decision maker as well. They cannot vacillate, but they must hear from everyone, teachers, community, and our staff. Right now, it's very difficult to deal with what we have going on in our world. We were surprised by this, and we weren't even done with the school year. And I was able to put together a plan for our COVID response in order to get our schools closed. I authored the plan for Palm Beach County, and some of our schools were under construction, and we have an obligation to the public to make sure we continue those. So at an early stage, I was understanding that we were establishing these protocols, and they were safe protocols. And in this time, that's the innovation that I would bring here, simply because we have to see that our future can't be predicated on our past. It has to be looking forward. I currently am the regional superintendent for South Region. It's about the same size. The data comparison is very similar. We're a little larger. I have about 65,000 students. I also have a little higher SEL, I have a little higher ESE, and I have a little higher free and reduced. But I separated our schools out, and I did a data comparison to both this district and my 59 schools, and realized the similarities are amazing. They really, between 1 point and 2 when it comes to the state goals and state scoring system. I also realized we were right there about the same points. Actually, the region gained a little more points, a few more points than Sarasota. Sarasota County is a special place. It's steeped in a long culture of history and arts. We have to be careful about how we move about and growth, but we also must understand, as I, coming in as a superintendent, would need to know that I have to fit into Sarasota. I have to grow the leaders that I've grown and coached over the years, that I learned from my father, from some great leaders that I were able to work under. I strongly believe that incorporating me into Sarasota, and not the other way around, there is so much good here. There are a few tweaks here and there, and nobody is happy with what we are currently. We always want to grow. And I looked at some of those tweaks, and hopefully I can bring that out in some of those answers. But most importantly, every child and every parent has to have a voice in this community. And I think you'll see that in some of my answers in my history, that's been my strength. Opening the doors to the folks that don't think they have a voice, but making sure that those that do also are heard. And in this time, and it's been my leadership style that collaboratively, catastrophic decisions are made in isolation. And that is not a way to lead. And I see this vibrant, culturally strong, very supportive community needing a leader that hears them and continues the greatness in this area. So as we go through the questions, and I do have a closing statement that I heard that I will be allowed to say, but I think you'll see when I speak that I'll bring out some of the actual happenings in my history that would address what I just said to you. I have 4 wonderful children that are very successful and came through the public school system. They had teachers that took care of them during a very difficult time in their lives, and I was thankful for that. And I want to make sure that every student in this county has that ability as well, regardless of what they look like, or their voice, or their language, or their income, or their parents' income. And I want to make sure they get that as well.
Thank you. Mrs. Brown.
Yes. I want to talk about some difficult personnel problems you might have run into. How would you handle it if you had a teacher or any staff member posting on social media, at this time, responding with racially charged or discriminatory or negative or, bashing a student or staff on social media? How would you handle that?
So that always used to be a gray area. I'm not sure it's gray any longer. We are public servants. We are committed to helping the public. We are funded by the public. We have an obligation to make sure that we are considered public figures at all times. That doesn't mean we don't have rights. Remember that there's always a process, and there's always progressive processes that are established here. And unfortunately, in the public view, many of the times we see public officials that are usually almost guilty before they're innocent. We can't go that route. But in a time of sensitivity and a time of cultural awareness that we're experiencing in the world, we are the leaders. We are looked up to daily by our community and expected and respected to make sure we do the right things. I don't believe there is ever a time in anyone's life to make an insensitive comment. I'm reading the book Push Out right now about the African American females in schools and the systems, and the very systems that are supposed to be helping us are some of the ones we've created, and we think we're helping them, and we aren't. There is not a time ever to be culturally insensitive anymore. We have to stop that. And I know currently you're in the midst of an equity policy and a bullying policy. Some of the things that were said from you all make absolutely great sense. There's not a time and place for it any longer. We are individuals. We are protected by amendments and our Bill of Rights, but we also have an obligation to the public to maintain and retain their trust and respect. As you cannot be that open in public and expect a child, maybe a child of color, walk into your classroom and them to feel comfortable in your room. That's not going to happen, because that child's going to see what you said. We have to be better. We have to be better. And I know there's progressive discipline and there's in place, but right now we have to look at that a little closer. We are teachers, and if we want to hold them to the super standards and hold them up high like I do, the salt of the earth, then we have to expect they'll be that way as well.
Thank you. Give an example of how you have either collectively or collaboratively bargained an employee contract, or what's your philosophy on bargaining?
So I believe that every group should be represented strongly. Every group should be heard. Let's remember that great classrooms are run by great teachers, great schools are run by great principals, and great districts are run by great superintendents. Those are not mutually exclusive. But they're also the bargaining units for the folks that get behind the wheel that I'm going to be doing shortly, and the folks that keep our schools sanitized right now. How important is that? We forget that there's 5 processes before, or 4 processes before, now 5, that before a child gets even to in classroom. How do they get there? Bus driver picks them up. They're probably going to eat. The cafeteria staff's feeding them. The custodial staff is going to be clean. And then we have to have the mental health. We have to have a healthy child. So before the teacher even sees them, those respected groups need to have organization. So I've been on several. Right now I'm currently on the CTA bargaining, which is our Classroom Teachers Association, which we should be ratifying shortly. I have strong support from the union because I listen. We understand that we don't operate well unless we have teachers that are comfortable. Teachers are always underpaid. We know that. I was a son of a teacher. I know what it's like not to have a phone for over the summer, or maybe power goes out every once in a while. We have to make sure they're comfortable and ready to provide anything they can for our students. And we will give them what we need to, what we have to, what we can. One thing I've really have understood in the bargaining process, especially with the CTA recently, is we always, as administrators, say what we want to give them. It doesn't work that way. We have to ask them what they want as opposed to what we're going to give them. That opens up a conversation in a negative way. It says, here's what I'm going to give you, instead of tell me what you need, tell me what we want to do. And that conversation as well. I remember working with a police union a few years ago about this, and they were really hung up on one item, and it was dry cleaning. It was dry cleaning their uniforms. And they were willing to work through other pieces because they really wanted that. They felt that was an important piece. It made them feel special. And it was an easy give. It was really an easy give. But if you walk in saying no, 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 then you've really shut down the listening process. We know that without our staff, without those folks that drive the buses or feed our students, sanitize our schools, teach our children, provide the mental health, the nurses, if we are not providing for them and giving them a good place to be and be comfortable with their salary and what their benefits are, we're not going to win this battle. We're not going to win this battle. It happens in the classroom first, and it happens in the small staff and the small organizations that make up all of us, make up the big organization. So I've been on several of those, but it's a listening process first.
In dealing with different programs like special ed, federal programs, and career tech, and other at-risk issues?
So are you wanting to clump them together, or would you like me to separate those out?
Have you worked with any of them?
Yes, I've worked with all of them extensively. I'll leave that CTE one alone because I think those were my middle initials for the last 7 years around the country as I was known. But more importantly, just for a quick example, a board member had just emailed me just before I walked in here about a student with ESE that might have been mislabeled, and we're working through it. We don't know. We can't say that. But the reality is, if you're not sitting down with that group of individuals, the teachers and the parents that are well informed and understand their rights, understand where you process through, we are not doing what we are supposed to do. ESE is not some sort of scam. It's not sort of way to navigate through the system. It's a federal program that is required, and we have to maintain it, and we have to be a part of that. And it's to give the child every opportunity in their student disability, however it be, to make them on par, on level, and give them the opportunities. So I've spent several years with the ESE groups. We have a very strong board member with ESE. And right now, I am currently a regional superintendent over our ESE center like you have here, Oak Ridge, Oak Park. We have one. It's a K through 12. It's a phenomenal, wonderful center. It's where students are able to achieve what they can. And it's most importantly an opportunity for our teachers who have that calling to work for it. We have a strong staff there that understand that this is their calling. And my wife was a ESE teacher for many, many years.
Thank you. Could you describe your ability to cultivate a disciplined and safe, orderly school environment? I mean, I'm talking about smoking, guns, the whole gamut.
So I'm going to work backwards on this one. And I know I'm applying for a superintendent's position, but I don't think you get a picture of me unless I talk about some of my leadership days as a principal. I was called a week before arriving at a high school campus by the superintendent, and he said, I need you to make the school an A. It's about to become a C. It's the only high school in Boca that's not even an A. And I need you to clean it up, or there's too much violence there, too many suspensions, the graduation's not good. And I said, okay. He says, I need it to be an A by the end of the year. Okay, I got a week. I don't have staff. And without thinking about anything, I grabbed the faculty, and we talked about the culture of the school. And they told me exactly what had been going on there. Now, I taught there years before, and then it changed. And they told me that right now there is no sense of ownership. Everyone feels as though the school, no one's safe. They don't feel important. They're not respected. When I heard that, I realized this is not a discipline issue. This is not a graduation issue. This is a culture issue. Back when mental health was not as known, and remember, mental health is being healthy. It's not mental sickness, mental illness, it's mental health. We made some quick changes there. I brought in the student groups immediately, and we sat down and said, what can I do as principal? I'm a new principal here, what can we do? And I got a great list from them. You know, the bathrooms are dirty. The kids are smoking in the bath. That was one of the big ones. There's nobody has an ability to be safe or go to a place where they can talk to an adult. So I realized that the culture was different. That year the previous year we had, I did the documentation, 40-some physical altercations on a campus of a couple thousand. That next year we had 8. Because the students felt safe, they felt respected, teachers had an opportunity to teach, and they were supported. But more importantly, the culture had changed. And I'll get back to that at one other point, because I think there's another story that goes to that. But it's about culture. It's that communication, about making people feel valued, respected. And that doesn't mean being indecisive. It means getting in input from everyone that's valued. So that is where I've created that culture that everyone owns the building. Everyone owns the campus. Everyone owns the district.
What's your experience in facilities management or construction and planning for growth?
I was fortunate enough to spend some time with your planner for this district. She's one of my folks that was walking me around. I've spent a lot of years in the last 7, 8, almost 9 years now planning with our planning department because of controlling the choice office, as well as the 5-year plan that I crafted and bringing in K-8s. If you looked at my Twitter recently, I was at the brand new K-8 that's almost finished that we built in Boca Raton. It's the 3rd one, and we had plans for 5. It's taken some years, but facilities is something I've been interactive with consistently. I understand the implications of oversight committees. We have something called Cork there. It is a citizens review, but I am knee-deep, and as we build this other K-8, I have another K-8 being built that's breaking ground here in about a month or so. That's a long time, another school, because right now K-8 seems to be a comfort zone for a lot of parents. You know, middle school, again, I'll say it again, middle school is the best place to be on a weekend. It's middle school, and parents have a hard time moving that. So we're really building the K-8s, and we're enjoying that. But facilities, again, knee-deep in that, and part of the planning process and what the design is, and making sure we meet the standards by the state.
Thank you. One last question. What is your experience in working with charter schools or magnet schools, private schools, and or I guess even private? Sure. How do you work with your charter schools in your district?
I oversaw the charter department 4 years. It was part of my division. I don't support bad charter schools. I don't support bad district schools either. Charter schools are legislated by the state. And it's our responsibility to make sure that when they enroll or when they apply, that they meet those 19 pieces of criteria, and they are in the best interest. And why are they opening? Are we not doing something? K-8 was one of them. Charter schools are there for a reason, and some of them are phenomenal, especially when they serve a special population. We have an autistic charter school down in Palm Beach County that we can't compete with, and we don't. We support them as much as we can because they're so good at it. They've filled the void that we really aren't. We do, but they are even better at it. So As far as a charter school supporter, I'm in support of really good schools. And I've been up to the state of Florida and challenging them, and I've won a couple battles where we've closed them. Most recently, 2 years ago, we closed one that was just financially unsound and not practicing good academics for students. As far as magnet schools go, I believe my resume indicated that I revamped an entire district over a 5-year period and became nationally known as the leader in magnet schools and choice, and making sure that our students have choices to go to schools that they wanted to go to based on programs and not based on zip code or financial means of the parent. It was opened up everywhere and regionally. As a matter of fact, that a couple years ago, after I put that plan in place and was able to do that on a shoestring budget, we received as a district the national award for the top district for Magnet Schools of America for equity and achievement. And that's a big award, and that's nationally. So that is one of my most proudest moments, because after all those years of working to make sure every student has an opportunity, that they saw that nationally. And now Palm Beach County is pretty much known as a great template for choice. We have a lot of school districts from around the country come in and ask about it. But that was my previous job.
I think I've got time for a follow-up on that one, and that is magnet schools are great, and it's nice to offer something for anybody. But are they really for anybody? Transportation is an issue. How do you handle transportation on a magnet school?
So that was one of the things when I became, and I think that was in my video, that when I became assistant superintendent 2011, 2012, my first recognition was we're not equitable. Only certain kinds of kids get to those programs. And it was because we had so few. And it wasn't fair. And the students, maybe students of color, were being cherry-picked from the local schools, which really hurt some of those Title I schools, especially with our school grading system in the state of Florida. And the only way to get around that was to expand that and make sure there were regions. So what I did was we did have transportation. We do have transportation. Choice transportation's a big chunk of change, and we were running all over the place. What I did is divide it up in regions, that if I have 3 high schools in my area and I'm designed to go to one and the other one has the program in my region, I'm allowed to go to that program and apply for it. I can't go across the entire district to go to a specific school. We only have 3 schools like that, and they've been around since the early 90s with the original magnet school grant. So it's complex. It wasn't easy. It saved some money, a lot of money in diesel fuel. Diesel fuel is not a good investment, but it also gave so many more opportunities for our students who didn't think the schools were for them. And they were. And that's one of the reasons why we won the award, because of equity and being able to not be elitist, in so many words.
Yeah, I like that idea of regions, because you're much bigger than we are.
Sure.
But that might issue some things.
Students should have the opportunity to attend a school that they're interested in the program. Instead of school shopping, it's program shopping. I'm interested in becoming a doctor. I want to go to that medical program. My high school doesn't have it. I'm not traveling 45 minutes. I got another high school that's 10 minutes away.
Thank you.
Mr. Robinson?
This is my last question last time, but for time, I'm going to make it my first question because I thought it was really important.
Okay.
If you're the superintendent, how are you going to define success?
I'm going to build on the success that's already here. It's easy to find success in Sarasota County. I mean, what you guys were second highest, third highest point total scorer in this district. Where you are struggling are some of the constant problems that many school districts have, like we do. The success has to be in some of the schools that are not successful right now. It's not that the teachers aren't working. It's not that the principal's not great. It's not that the community doesn't want a great school. So my success would be fine in closing that achievement gap. Let's look at what's great. Let's not touch it. Why would you mess with something that's working? Nothing's perfect. And my success would be found in the schools that are struggling right now.
You mentioned equitable when you were talking about the magnet schools. So I'm a CPA, so it's going to be about money.
Sure.
And so what are your thoughts about equitable funding of the schools instead of equalizing funding?
So that was one of the things I did to make that program happen. I reallocated funds. There was some entitlements that went to these schools over years, and some of them were not getting the return on the investment, but they were getting the money. And that's not fair. So when we went through a budget cut, I doubled the budget cut and reallocated some to some of the other schools, especially the Title I schools that weren't able to benefit from some choice money. Some other areas, and especially the arts, we did not feed the arts properly or IB properly. So when you look at that, equity doesn't mean everyone gets it equal. Equity means that we fill in to make everybody equal. But more importantly, that's got to have a system of checks and balances, and it has to have an accountability system. And that's where I stepped in and said, wait a second, you get this money and you're not spending it on this, but you're not getting it anymore. It's got to be about, if you're going to use it and you're going to get it, it's got to be for what we do. And if it's making the difference, you're going to continue on. So my success would be found in those schools that are not the A's, that struggle, and bring in the equity piece, and especially the district support. The district support is important, not just programs or programs you can buy. Equity also means spending some time in those schools. I'm sure some of the specialists are some of the best teachers in this building, and maybe they need to be there as well.
So one of the two ways in which we can get extra money is going out and getting a referendum to increase the millage, going out for a referendum to borrow money, and going out and getting COPS funding to borrow money. Mm-hmm. When would you use each mechanism?
So that's an input lever that requires stakeholder interest as well as the business community and against us as one voice. I know we have individual voices when we meet and talk about things, but we have to have that collaborative voice, and that's got to be part of the strategic plan. That's got to be how we're going to spend our money. Because once we establish that strategic plan, everything we do, everything we say revolves around the ability to follow that strategic plan. And part of that's going to be big in equity. When do you use those funds? When we are comfortable with the public knowing that those funds are being used to build new schools. I believe you're building a K-8 as well. To build, to use, to incorporate, and to support. To give you a blanket answer would be difficult because we don't know what the constituents here and the community members want, but it's worth listening to. And as we move forward through taxpayer funds, we have to make sure there's an oversight that's outside of our building. But as we move into what we do with it, it's very difficult to answer that question unless we see specifically what projects we want. I know there'll always be an equity piece to an opening up schools or increasing school achievements with that money. So that's a tough question. I don't know if I answered it, but I know it would have to be a lot of listening first before we move, and a lot of research on what is working and what isn't working.
For our operating fund balance, we have a range, and that's usually we do the revenues, the expenses. That where it always ends up hitting is either adding or subtracting to the fund balance. It's always hitting that. What would be an acceptable range that you would want to see for fund balance?
If you were to ask me that question a year ago, it would be different. Today's answer is much different. If you were to tell me that 7 to 8% is a good number, I'd be very comfortable with that. And everyone wants to strive for 5%, especially the unassessed or the unused stuff that's not designed for anyone. I'm comfortable with 10 right now. We don't know what 2 months looks like from here. We do not know what our school district looks like. 2 weeks ago we were thinking about when we're coming back. Now we're looking at, are we coming back? And that's tough because those plans change every day. And if we don't have the piggy bank, and pretty much that's what we're talking about. If we don't have that fund balance close to 10%, I'm uncomfortable with it because we don't know what the future holds. And it's easier and there's more options when you have money to support some decisions that you can't predict right now. So I think 8 to 10 is a really good place.
What would you do to recruit and retain good employees? Well,
that's a long answer, and I'll make it short. First of all, Sarasota is beautiful. It's a great community. It's a thriving community. So that in and of itself is great. Teacher salary is important. Affordability of living and moving here for families is important. Those are some of the things we sort of control. I understand that the impact fees are low and moving, which invites folks to come here and live here, but it doesn't help our tax base in supporting education. So we can't control those pieces. What we can control is the culture of Sarasota County Schools. As I said in my video, I had a local university call me and say, why are teachers never leaving you? And it's simply a culture. It's creating that culture that you're respected, you have an opportunity for growth, you are respected, and you are supported. We have a big change coming up, and our teachers will teach everything that they know how to teach. And if we don't support them through the next few months on this change in learning and the change in teaching, we're going to be behind the 8 ball. But if we're out front of it And we're giving professional development that helps establish that teachers are comfortable in the moving forward in this virtual world or this hybrid world or what next catastrophe is around the corner. If I'm a teacher at another place and I see us leading, especially north of us or south of us, say they respect folks. They train their teachers. They support their teachers and prepare them for what's coming and listen to them. That's the best way to do it. And if it means me going to job fairs, which I've done many times, it'll be me. It's when you can sell your industry better than everyone else, they'll come here. And I believe we can do that in Sarasota County. Nothing taking it against South and North, but I believe we could be much better than them. And I think we already are, but even better.
You mentioned in your previous answer that one of the things we do have control over is teacher salary. Mm-hmm. And the minimum salary is somewhat little taken over by the state. So,
sure.
What would you strive to make the average teacher salary? So,
I don't know if I can give you a specific number. I just know that the teachers in the middle right now are sort of left out with this new proclamation, unfortunately. You have to start somewhere and understand the governor's perspective. I do. I really do. Because when you can go out and have other jobs in the service industry without the paying for a degree, without the constant professional development, children and grading papers on weekends and such, we have to be a little bit better than that. And those are the teachers, and remember, most teachers leave after 3 to 5 years. They go do something else. And those are the ones that are not protected right now with the salary increase, as I read it. So we have to really look at that and work with the union here and say, how can we retain our teachers? Last I checked, there wasn't a line out the door for teachers to be waiting for jobs. I know that Sarasota is the same place that Palm Beach County is, 2 great counties. We have vacancies. We have vacancies because there isn't qualified staff out there. And we just can't put anyone in front of children. So we have to look at that middle group that's not really being taken, and the experienced group. It's a great start. I get it. It's a great start. He's altered some of the A+ monies and those rewards, but it's a start. But we have to protect the ones, because right now, if we don't protect those, we're going to lose that solid core group in the middle. And remember, nothing gets done and no student learns without a teacher teaching them, period. So,
for large part, our funding is dictated by the state, but we have the ability to go out to referendum for additional funds up to our maximum millage. So what, I'm sorry?
Go ahead. I'm ready to answer before you finish, sorry.
I don't know if you know the answer. What would you strive for the per pupil funding to be? Because that would dictate if you would go out for referendum for additional funding or not. So what would you...
So let me piggyback.
And answer the question you actually thought I was going to answer too.
Well, let me piggyback from the previous question. You know, in Palm Beach County, and you have a couple of us, good friends of mine, Gonzo and Keith coming up, which is quality people. We were able to pass a referendum where we increased salaries of those folks in the middle through the referendum. If you had 1 to 4 years, you were getting a $1,000 bonus at the end of the year. If you had 5 to 9 years, you got $5,000 at the end of the year. Well, it was mixed in your paycheck. If you had 10 plus years, you were getting a $10,000 bonus at the end of the year, every year, for the next 3 years of the referendum, 3 years left. That's something we have to look at closely, because we saw a lot of Broward County teachers, which neighbors us to the south, come flying in, and Martin County teachers come flying in. When you offer those kind of incentives, we also saw administrators from the building that were teachers go back to the classroom because they were not employed during the summer and able to do that. So to get back to your other question, when you look at the cost of educating a child, it's never enough. And you look at the high end of the Connecticut's and the Delawares and Massachusetts, and they're in the 20,000s range, and we're still in the 7,000 range. You know, if we could get to $8,000, $9,000, $10,000, that's a great number. That is a great number. Can that be supported by our legislature? That's another piece there, because when we mix in the funding, most of our budget is salary. Almost all of it is salary. And when you mix that in with what per pupil funding is, it really ties our hands. What we can do internally, though, is really look at what positions are not returning on investment. We have to think about, not only in that per pupil funding, is also mental health counselors. That was part of our referendum. You have to have someone on every campus with mental health, as a mental health advisor or mental health counselor. Not a counselor, not a guidance counselor, but a mental health person.
What are your views on zero-based budgeting?
So we've done a few zero-based. I was a product of a zero-based budgeting back in 1992 when I was a teacher. there's a lot of positives to zero-based budgeting, and I think the best one is you start to see things that you've paid for many years and didn't know where it was going. Sometimes it's like those bills that keep coming on your credit card, and they just keep showing up, and you just keep paying it, and you don't know what it's for. You've had it so long, you don't even know what service it is. When you zero-base that, in that type of zero-based budgeting, not zero-based campus, I'm a total different thing. When you zero-base that and you start back up of what you need, you start looking at the requirements, what you need to survive, what you need to move forward, what you need to make sure that our low-end students, readers, are getting what they need. You can't just start trimming and cutting. And then you'll start to find some things that are being paid for that you're not sure what they are. And those are the ones that you first go after, because we don't know what they are. So that there is a good exercise for that. I believe in it. I think it's a strong piece to it. I don't know if it needs certain parameters. I'd hate to be stuck on specifics of the parameters. But anytime you look at that, you also have to have an oversight of looking at how you would do it and where would the cuts be, and make sure there's a process before you start zeroing out and eradicating certain positions or certain functions or certain programs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Ziegler?
Thank you, and thank you for being here. Interestingly enough, a lot of the questions I have, you have merged into some of the previous responses, which is completely fine. Speaking as far as leadership, there are all different types of leadership styles. Can you describe what your leadership style is?
I think I broke into that with I'm a coach and a teacher at first. I'm a collaborative leader. I don't believe in doing things in isolation. And don't confuse that with a non-decision maker. I am strong at decision making, but my decision is predicated on making sure that I have information from all parties. I also grow leaders. It's been one of my jewels in my crown that I've grown so many principals, assistant principals, directors, and assistant superintendents. My job is to work side by side with folks and coach them through to be the best they can. And those are folks that were inside the system already. They're not folks that we just recruited in and brought in. And no, there are good people everywhere, and growing them. So I'm a collaborator, a communicator, but most importantly, if you ever speak to anyone, they say I have an incredible ability to have relationships with everybody and understand and respect where they're coming from and hear them. A few years ago, I couldn't say that. 10 years ago, I was not a good listener. I was one of those folks that waited for someone to stop talking. And I already had my thoughts. That has stopped. I think listening is more, and I think I just opened that up with the teachers union or the union bargaining groups. You got to listen first, and then you start understanding people. And there's a lot of folks that already have their opinions set and forward and moving on. If I don't understand what my staff needs or what a parent needs or what a teacher needs, if I can't hear them, I don't know what they need. I'm going to tell them what I want them to hear, and that's not it. It's listening to them first. So I'm all about building relationships, building capacity, building the culture, but most importantly, I'm a coach. I coach people to be better, and one day I'll be working for someone who I've grew through the process, and I'll be okay with that. I'll be okay with that.
Well, and another question I responded to or asked was around communication, but you touched on that, so I'm going to move to, which I appreciate. Thank you. Tell us about what is your greatest professional disappointment, and what did you learn from it? And how have you adapted since?
So everyone wants to talk about where they failed. I mean, that's always a great topic. Not really. There are multiple ones. But I believe that the one that I've always been told not to talk about, but I think it's my most important lesson, and it really does touch with all of you. There was a process that we had to go through because we were losing students at the middle school level, and we were trying to reallocate that zone and move it. And it was about 5-6 years ago, and I had the perfect plan. I had it all set. I met with my team. The board didn't like it. The board did not like it. As a matter of fact, they were pretty angry at me that day. And it wasn't a good day. And I went back and realized, I could have been angry as angry could be, but I realized I went about this the wrong way. And that was that listening piece I just talked to. I went back out to the communities. I went back out to the churches. I went back out to all the ABC meetings. I went back out to the individuals and to the folks that aren't going to be in the board meeting. They're not calling you. They're at work. They're working 2 jobs and may not speak our language. They are threatened by government institutions. All sorts of folks. I went to them. and I started speaking to them. What do you need for this to happen? Because we can't run 3 schools at under 50% capacity. It's too expensive. We have to merge them. It took 3.5, 4 years later for me to finally get through that, and it was redone, and it was done successfully. And although I'm always advised not to talk about this, you know what? That was my biggest learning experience. I'm sorry. It was a very difficult position, difficult circumstance. I thought I had the answer, but you know what? I didn't feel it. It was something I was doing. I didn't live in that community. I lived in the other community that they were bringing the students into, and I didn't know what everyone else thought. And I think that was one of my biggest changes about listening at that point. I had to hear what everyone else wanted, not what Pete Licata wanted. Pete Licata wants a lot of great things, but when it involves a community and a school and a tax base, I got to hear them first. So that was probably my biggest learning experience, and turned it into a positive. And that would be part about communicating with the board. It's got to be shopped. It's got to be shopped. It's got to be talked about. It's got to be communicated properly. And each one of you, if I am superintendent, will get the same message. It's not a different message to customize to your beliefs or your constituency. It's got to be the same message, because then it's a false narrative. And that, what I say to you, I have to say to Carolyn, I have to say to Jane, I have to say Shirley. Sorry to use your first names, but I have to say it. And that was probably one of the biggest turning points. And that's, as I've said before, no one ever wants to close a school. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And it beat me up pretty good. And I took it personally, but then realized it was bigger than me. So.
No, thank you for that. One question, and I know you did again reference COVID-19, and you can answer this however you'd like. Certainly in leadership, there are a number of times there's challenges in front of you that you don't necessarily have a roadmap, and it doesn't appear that there's any right answer. If you want to use COVID, by all means, but is there a scenario where you talk to us about how you make those decisions, as far as when the path forward does not appear to have any good answers for you?
So I think we're all learning a lot about this. We're learning so much that, I was reading yesterday that some of the parents were concerned that they didn't have an opportunity here to participate in the survey. Why are we now in the survey when a draft plan went out? Well, a lot of districts are doing 2 different surveys now. They're doing another one because things have changed. Things have changed. You can't stop listening. I think I made that very, very clear. But you also have to be the leader that makes the decision, and it has to be a collaborative decision. You can't, silly reference, but the band Rush from Canada use the famous words, if you choose not to decide, you've still made a choice. So eventually you have to make a choice, but you have to make a choice that fits the bill for everybody involved here. Not just some of our students, not just some of our parents, not the ones that are going to call. It's the parents that may not call, or the students that really need to come back to school because both parents work all the time. But we have to do it in a safe and fashionable manner. In other words, we have to be clear on it. So what we say today about COVID-19 is going to be different tomorrow. What we know is we have to look at education differently. And I don't know if I'm getting exactly to your question specifically, but the more input and the more opportunity for input. I did 3 town hall meetings on virtual just before I got here with my communities. And the question came in through email, just hundreds and hundreds. And we lumped them together, my staff and I, but they're all over the board. And what you say for one is great. The next person's going to say, for every email I got in the middle of the night last night, my kids have to be at school. I got another one that said, why would you consider putting kids back in school? And then you have the next one. Virtual learning is not good for me. My kid's thriving in virtual learning. So it's very difficult, and I'm not going to answer that because I think a few superintendents around the state have cemented their feet in some plans, and now they're backtracking with some heavy feet. So I think it's just being flexible, innovative, and ability to pivot quickly, which I think is one of my strengths.
And if by way of time, am I done? Oh, well, if I have time for follow-up. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Welcome, Dr. Licata. Thank you for being here today.
Congratulations for your appointment, by the way.
Oh, thank you very much. And my topic is instructional excellence. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions. The first is, what sort of unique, creative, inspired, out-of-the-box type of idea did you implement that saw results in improving student achievement?
You just want one?
Well, we'll start with that.
Okay. I was appointed, again, one of those jobs I never applied for, just kept getting moved up, which was fine, to Director of Curriculum. And we were middle of the summer, and we realized that our graduation rates were hinging on the old FCAT. And this is 2011, 2012. And we had about 4 weeks before the school year started, and I had a vendor that was calling me, say, I'll do a pilot. And we have that often. And with about $830,000 for a district with 165,000 students, and we had it, and it was fine. It was Title I monies that we were able to use. I put together a 2-week FCAT retake program that required students that didn't require them, but we encouraged them, that were not graduating, that were seniors or juniors because they haven't passed the FCAT. And that was one of the requirements back then. And we focused in solely on that program that was given to us. Originally it was 12 schools. I got them all the way up to 30 schools for free. We transported them. We were able to use it in funds that way. We fed them. And we also paid our teachers their wage. The program was phenomenal. I actually used some of the data for a dissertation that I later changed. But out of the 30 schools that we put in there for 2 weeks, I put it together in a week. I had a lot of help. It's not like Pete did everything. We had 9 school sites, 9 high school sites that ran it, and 4 elementary school sites that ran it, and the remainder were middle schools. We were able to increase, and I always confuse these, we were able to increase the reading FCAT passing score at 5%, and the math at 7%. Our graduation rates skyrocketed because of it, because when they took that test in November, a month later, and we made sure we stayed with that program, and I got the rights to the program for the next few months, we were able to make a big impact on our graduation rates of the students that we knew needed extra support. It wasn't the program so much, and I didn't want to get locked in on the program because so many programs are phenomenal, but if you're not supported, and this was supported by the company, we were successful in that way. I also found out something very funny, that program required printing of certificates, color certificates that so-and-so John made to the next level. And to look at a high school senior that's bigger than me, and I'm not a small man, who headed somewhere to play football or basketball, and get angry because his certificate is not in color. I realized every award deserves to be given to kids because they work for it. And I was so surprised when I found out, why do they get a color printer now? So it's a small anecdote, but I realized that achievement to kids and recognizing really mattered. I don't care how big they are, how old they are. And that was nice. That was one of my best accomplishments when thinking out of the box, bringing them in for 2 weeks and feeding them and getting them ready, and not making it going to school, making it I'm going to advance. So that was one of my feathers, without a doubt.
Eliminating the achievement gap is a must. What approaches would you pursue, and what leadership and guidance would you provide in this effort?
So I think I touched on some of that with Mr. Robbins, Eric's response, but I want to elaborate a little bit more. About 3 years ago, we realized when we were, now remember, we're the 5th largest, 6th largest, whatever, 11th largest, 10th largest in the nation, district in the country. We're 5th in the state. We're half the size of Miami-Dade. We're 2/3 the size of Broward. We became a machine in creating acceleration in college coursework. We led the state in all of those. And we're still, 200,000 kids strong, yes. But we looked deeper into the data again and realized that some of our students, especially with the label of ELL or ESE, F&R, were still not getting as many opportunities. They were higher than they were before. And I knew something had to be done. So I sat with a few specialists of mine, because it was over my division, and a manager and the director, and said, why is this happening? What's going on here? So we looked at the master schedule back before master schedule analysis was cool, and we realized that a lot of kids who maybe not speak English or have a grasp of the language because they're in reading doesn't mean they can't technically do something or can't achieve in a college-type atmosphere. So I just simply said, we are going to make that our objective statement for the year, and that's our goal. We're going to increase 3%, 5%, I think it was 5% at the time, 5%. I said 5% for our ESE, F&R, ELL students for accelerated credit, whether it be college, CTE, industry cert. And, I got the tilted head look like, are you kidding me? And then we went to the schools and said, these kids need to be in these classes. We've analyzed them, we looked at their scores, we looked at how strong they are in their native language. They have to be in these courses. Let's get them in there. At the end of the year, we didn't do 5%. We did upwards to a 20% increase on some of those groups. And it was really clear. When you make it part of your job every day to make sure that those students achieve and support them, and not just say, oh yeah, we give them money, we give them programs, yeah, that'll be fine. When it's part of your evaluation and when it's part of what you earn, or whether you have a great evaluation or good evaluation or phenomenal, when it's a focus point, and it was my focus point, it was the whole department's focus, and we just achieved it without even realizing it. And it was simply because it was a focal point. Didn't mean we forgot everybody else. We were still off the charts and knocking the Jesus out of everyone else, but it was about those groups that we felt could do better. And again, it was a focal point. That was what we woke up and did every day. We are going to make these groups in a place to where they can earn college and accelerated credits. So.
How has your district made support services an integral part of student achievement? Describe your role in this.
So our support services are aplenty, and we understand that districts should be supportive of school campuses. Remember, no teaching goes on in our district offices here. And I always say that my office is in this building, but my work is out there. And that's the way it needs to be perceived. So support services and quality support services is important. I already went into the mental health piece of that. We have to make sure that that's there. Overseeing alternative ed for years, what we noticed is we are not going to change a child's trajectory if we continue to keep them on that same path of alternative ed, let them go, just keep going, and maybe they'll age out, maybe they'll graduate, hopefully they'll get a skill set. That's an awful way to perceive a child that may have done something wrong as a child. So what we did is we reduced expulsion significantly. We brought in some CTE programs and supported from the district. And we also looked at what is the process of putting a child into alternative ed. Yes, I get it. Campuses have to be safe. You're not going to find a bigger supporter of that. But what are we doing up front? Where is the recognition? And those support services need to be there for those upfront pieces. Whether it's mental health, whether it's financial. I mean, how many homeless students do we have? I tell the story about the kid who almost punched me in the head one day because I told him to take his hat off. I didn't suspend him. I didn't even give him detention in front of the entire school. I brought him to my office and said, what's going on? He said, I got thrown out of my house. My mother's boyfriend beat me up last night. This kid was a 2.1. What am I going to do? Arrest him or put him in an alternative ed environment as a principal? No, I'm going to give him support. So I told him, every day you're coming to my office, I'm going to feed you, and you're going to go ahead and sit here and tell me, because he was a 2.1 kid. And if he goes below 2.0, he doesn't graduate. That's before. That's working on the cause, not the effect. And support services should be working on the cause. And we do see impact in assessments or any type of a diagnostic. That's when we pinpoint and target through PLCs and through other means to say, teachers, what do you need? How can we support? Let us help you diagnose each child and work specifically on the individual needs of that child, not as a group. The child masters that. Let's move to the next one. So support services is just that, support services. They should never be walking into a classroom telling teachers what to do. A teacher's environment is where they do their best work. And if we hold them to a standard, let's let them do what they do best. Because some teachers teach differently and are successful. Some teachers straight out of the box and they do it well. But support services is about supporting that teacher because they're the ones that make the difference.
Thank you.
How do you balance the needs of special populations like ESE, ELL, and students traditionally referred to as gifted and talented?
So that's a multi-part question, but my strong belief is if a child is willing to, and let's say the child has a learning disability, the child is willing and the parents are supportive enough to move that child into an inclusion environment and get the support services. Let's make sure we put them in the highest place they can achieve. Because if we put them in the middle or set their standards low, we'll get it. We'll definitely get it. John Hattie does some research on students, and he talks about size of classrooms. He also talks about the single most important, and it's not class size. It has no impact. From 18 to 28, there's no impact. The biggest single factor on student achievement is the belief by the teacher that they can do the work and they can be successful. And I have yet to meet a teacher that has that role or has that culture in their classroom, whether it's an ESE child, an ELL student, or even a gifted student. I have one of those. That's the important piece. So let's not prevent or barricade or put hurdles up for students that can achieve more. If they don't, we can back down. We'll reconvene the team and talk about it and see that they're not meeting the goals and the measures and back down and arrive at more support. but don't let's shortchange our kids. Let them do it. You'll be amazed at how great they are when you give them the right environment. So I think I answered that.
Mm-hmm. Give some examples. Do I have time or am I over? I'm over? Done?
Done.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you.
This is about board staff and community relations. What are your ideas about engaging families who are inexperienced with participating or have negative experiences with education? How would you support your staff to successfully and respectfully reach out to them?
Wow. Do you have an hour? This is a great question because right now there is a disconnect, especially in public education, and this is why other entities are going into the realm of education. First of all, everyone needs to be heard, and if they're disillusioned with the system, it's because of a reason. Something happened along the way, and we have to hear what they are. I meet with parents myself. I have no problem meeting with community. I also understand that our role is a servant to the community. We aren't their leaders in their household. We are their leaders in schools. And it's their expectations of what we should be doing to help their students. You will find a rare negative article or negative word spoken about my community and media in any way, shape, or form. As a matter of fact, without getting into the details, I think you understand that my first encounter as regional superintendent last year was in front of an angry mob that demanded answers because they deserved answers. My job was to replace a principal, international news, and I had to make sure I heard everything, and I had to meet with the community. I had to meet with the groups and the special special interest groups about this. And I knew there had to be some healing, but there had to be listening, and there had to be a decisive move on once they made decisions, and that decision on who that principal was going to be as a community, and they were invited into those meetings, and they were brought in. We are servants. We are public servants. We have the honor, and we carry the weight of being public servants. And going into the community is what we do. We don't open our gates and say, come on in, everybody. We go to them and say, it's a welcoming place. Let me show you what we do. Why don't you come down? And we'll take care of it. But there's an order of operation for that.
Describe a time when you had to choose between driving a plan forward or pausing to listen and learn. And what did you do and what lessons were learned?
Well, I'd like to learn that lesson before about not going forward and getting beat up, which I deserved. I'm going to go with a charter school that I myself didn't do it, but I knew that I was part of a small group, the superintendent, legal team. We had a charter school that was just ruining the system, ruining children. Funds were just so mismanaged. It was an awful environment. There was no teaching going on. And it's not easy to close a charter school. They're protected, and that's the way it should be. But this was something that we really wanted to push hard, push hard, push hard. We need to do it, we need to do it, we need to do it. And at one point, I believe we were sitting in a meeting in the chief counsel's conference room, and he said, we have to. And I said, what happens if we pause? If we pause, we know we are guiding our students a little bit in a month or two anyway, because certain statutes and regulations are going to shut them down anyway. If we go for it now it may get mixed up into litigation, may get a pause, a stand steady or stand pat rule, and we paused. And then that month or two came through, and by statute, it was much easier to close it rather than going off of statements, off of he said, she said, and the statute kicked in. And that was a great time. Our lawyer, who we're losing, is phenomenal, but it was the time when I said, can we wait and let statute take over and help with that process. There were other people involved in that, but that was a strong support of mine because it did happen that way.
Tell us about a time when you recognized an internal communication gap within the staff of your district. What did you do to address it? And what was the outcome?
I know there's some people watching right now, so I have to be really careful with this answer.
No, you have to be honest.
There was a disconnect about what principals thought was a alternative education placement incident versus what really should happen. And if you're going to make changes, you have to spell that out clearly. And there was some miscommunication when I picked up alternative education that principals were calling. And they weren't wrong. They had just been under the guise of, well, the child did this, now I can move them. They're off the campus, I'm suspending them. You know. And that's not the case. That's not what we do. We got to a place where we were so comfortable. And I remember being a principal and being able to do that. And that miscommunication was wrong. It wasn't wrong on the principal's part. It was because it wasn't echoed downward in a sense that these are the parameters. We worked with the Safe Schools assistant superintendent, and we worked together to make sure that we established a protocol, a program. It was completed actually about 8 months ago. But now principals understand this doesn't mean alternative ed. This does. This doesn't mean alternative placement. This does. Where are your interventions? Where are you fixing it up front? You can't just have a kid do something and say, well, they've done it before. Well, where were your interventions? So I think that communication now is about if a child is starting to do some behaviors that is not acceptable, let's get them the resources. If they continue, then we can talk, but let's make sure the resources are in place. Don't call me after the third time and say, this is the third time they did it. Well, I didn't know about it the first 2 times. Remember, principals only can operate with what their information is, so the communication had to be a lot clearer, and I think right now it's very, very clear. We want to keep our kids on campus, but we want to keep our campus safe through the right means.
Considering the many decisions that face any superintendent, how and what input do you currently obtain from your students, teachers, parents, staff, school administrators, and the business community who are directly affected by your decisions?
So I think I touched on some of that earlier about that, and I'm sorry that I ruined some of the questions. I think my formula moving into the high school principal realm was clear, that I listened to the teachers and the students first, and it gave me the recipe for how I could make it better. And that hasn't changed. And, you know, we do have a student a liaison that sits on our board as well. But remember, I'm not in the classroom every day. I'd like to be. I'm not on a school campus every day. I'd like to be. I'm not with the business community every day. When I instituted, and I hate using the word I because there's a small team of people. We're not massive. It was still my project. When I changed our programming, as we talked before, to regionalization, that required significant input. And we had a large meeting in a boardroom of 200 people. College presidents, PTSA, students, board members were there, teachers were there, parents were there, principals were there. And I mixed up the groups and said, how can we be better? This is some of our thought process. How can we be better? Some of the principals didn't like it because they were going to lose some of their best kids because they've been cherry picking. But at the end of the day, I incorporated that entire organization of people. And they were the support on when I brought the plan forward to the board saying, this is the input I got. This is the money we're going to save. These are the opportunities for the new students or the students that will benefit from this program. But more importantly, this came together as a massive community. Now, my business ties are incredible. That's one of my strengths. But I couldn't just listen to them. Even though we're producing their future talent workforce, we had to make sure we listened to parents, too. So that was another feather in my cap because that was a huge meeting that took on some massive roles. And that's when we took that showcase of schools that we did for our magnet program, and then now it's 15,000, 16,000 people show up to it now, you know, foaming at the mouth on what school am I going to get my kid into because I really like this program. I really want this program from K all the way to 12. So that was a turning point, and I think that question really encapsulates what I did at that point to make sure it was successful and make sure.
As a follow-up, so you use massive input rather than task forces?
No, it turned into a task force. It was a task force.
And what comprised your task force?
Business community, business partners. Education Foundation was big in it. Our teachers union, I asked bring us teachers that would like to be a part of this. Our principals association, our district administrative association, and the business development board, which is it's like a big massive chamber, but it increases our productivity in our business. So I went to them and said, give me a few of your folks that would be part of this. And
so
that was
no parents?
Oh, the parents were in there. PTSA selected our parents as well. I'm sorry, I left that out. Parents were in there as well. So it was all the big organizations and reduced it down to a task force. It could be considered a task force. I don't know if we had that term back then. Now it's a big task force. But it was a collaborative meeting with all the stakeholders being represented significantly.
What I was looking for was who made up I got it. You gave it to me.
Yeah, I went to the leaders of all these organizations that send me
Yes.
who you think instead of me selecting it. Because when I select it, I select people that want to hear my voice or tell me the same things I want to hear.
Thank you. Is there any additional information that you would like to share with the board? Because we're closing now, so.
Okay, is this my closing statement?
No, your closing statement is after this. Then you'll do your closing statement.
Is there any, no, if you could repeat, please. I have the floor. I think what comes across in my leadership is the ability to communicate, the ability to lead, and to be able to build leaders from within. Sarasota County is a very, very strong place. It's a wonderful place. I've spent a lot of time over here. Matter of fact, I've done some charitable events over here for the past few years, which have been wonderful for big brothers and big sisters. Not a lot of changing that needs to go on here. There's not a lot of changing that needs to go on here. There needs to be some improvements in some area. Everyone has to improve. Everything needs to be improved. But more importantly, anyone who places their foundation on the existing structures that we've been living for me, 26 years in education, is foolishly hoping that we get back to normalcy. There's a slim chance we will. I'm hoping, all of us are hoping, that there's this miraculous cure for this COVID. But you know what? The moment we get that, there's another issue out there. And it's what's going on in our streets right now about our youth, especially our youth of color, that are not feeling respected. So those staples and those institutions that we've relied upon and built our careers upon, and some very successful, maybe aren't the institutions we need to use moving forward. We really have to think about it. It doesn't mean we trash everything, we don't zero base it. We have to think about it differently. And my strength is definitely, I'm a business major out of the University of Miami. And then I got into education after my father passed away. It was incredible. But the reality is we have to pivot fast, and we have to be innovative. So I want to leave you with that. My leadership speaks for itself. If you have a difficult task, because there's strong candidates here, but one thing I bring to the table that maybe is different is when I speak to you, you're hearing it from my heart and from my head. It's not written down. Someone didn't write it for me. It's what I believe. And I'm always willing to take a question from anybody, because it's easy to speak the truth. It's easy to speak to something you know about. And I know a lot about me. My wife tells me that all the time.
Do you have any questions for the board?
No, just thank you.
No one has any questions for us. I don't understand that.
It's your turn to ask the questions.
I'm kidding with you. Put some levity in here. Again, we'd like to thank you for your interest and participation in this process. Was that your 5-minute closing that you gave?
No, I think that was just the floor.
Okay.
I think.
Give you 5 minutes. Don't listen to anybody else on the board. Just listen to me right now.
Okay. Again, I have a really nice closing statement.
Yes, I can't.
I'm
It's
sorry.
very hard to hear.
I have a really nice closing statement.
Voice thing over there, Kathy, it needs the volume flipped
Yeah.
up.
So I have this really nice closing statement that I've written down, and I've spoken over the few days. But reality is my wife and I have spent a lot of time here recently, and we've spent it over the years. And we've noticed what Sarasota is great for. We've enjoyed it. All I can think about is a pasta dish over at the restaurant down on Main Street. I won't use names, but I think you guys know what I'm talking about. It's famous for its culture. And I have to fit into this place. Nobody coming into this role should consider them more important than already what's established. And to me, that's about coaching and teaching and leading. My personality is about togetherness. It's about one unit, one organization coming together and making the best for children. And if we are not doing that, there are children that are left out. And that becomes, I think that's just natural for being a coach and a leader. It's the important piece. And I think it's important to also say this. I'm coming from a very large district, and you have some phenomenal candidates. I did a data study, again, between the two districts and realized how similar they were in achievement, in environment, in schools, and the differences were minimal. That experience is important because that's what I'm doing right now. But more importantly, coming from a big district, I've learned that if you don't stay in contact with the folks that make the difference. The wonderful woman that's going to drive me around in the bus today, that makes sure that our kids get to school every day. And you're losing touch. And if everything isn't within arm's length, then you're losing touch with it. And if you're not listening to everyone in the organization. I also want to make sure something is very clear. Not only do I need to fit into Sarasota and bring my leadership skills there, but I also make sure that this is not just a stepping stone for me. I'm not waiting to move to somewhere else. Sarasota is a place I want to retire to in 10 years. I got 10 years. And I won't retire. I know that, if I'm fortunate, God-given. And it's a family place that my wife is very supportive because her work allows her. Allows her to work here. This is my capstone. I have a lot to be thankful for. I have a lot to be proud of. I have so many things that just, I'm blessed. It's a wonderful, there's never a complaint. If you hear me complaining, I'm lying. But this would be my capstone. And this is a place I can find myself very comfortable in, making sure that we make those steps even farther into success and become the #1 district with that. And making sure all children are achieving, not just the ones that have the resources. And that's the way to get there. So you have my commitment, you have my passion, and you must certainly have my honesty, because I think I've been very honest with you all. And I appreciate your time. I look forward to meeting each and every one of you tomorrow. And you're welcome to ask me whatever you would like. So thank you for your time. And Chairman Zucker, I appreciate you being on time and such. My father was a military man, and he always said, if you're on time, you're late. So.
Well, this evening you'll be participating in a modified meet and greet using a live stream format. And tomorrow we will meet individually for our one-on-one interviews. And please let FSBA staff know if you have any questions or concerns, or if you need anything. It would be great. And again, thank you for coming here, for your interest in this position. And
it's wonderful. Thank you very, very much.
Have a fun afternoon.
Could I again ask for the written comments for your closing statement? I know you didn't give them, but if we could get a copy of your written statement for your closing? Or is it... No, it's fine. That's fine.
Yes.
That's fine.
I could provide that later today, no problem.
It's okay.
I have the edited version that you change your mind 3-4 times.
It's okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, we are now at a break. How did I get ahead of myself?
You are. You were giving all the members 10 minutes instead of 15.
No, I'm ahead.
Yeah.
It should be 11:30.
Yeah, you were cutting everybody off after 10 minutes instead of 15. But that's okay.